Good morning. There you go. It's working now. My name is Mark Roberts. I'm president of the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, but I didn't always do that, okay? Let me talk a little bit about where I came from, because that's one of the things that the challenges right now, number one for us, is to let people know about what occupational medicine is. So, how many physicians are in the room? PAs? Fantastic. Nurse practitioners? Fantastic. Okay. I apologize in advance because I often say physicians, okay? We'll work on that. I'm trainable. I spent a number of years as a welder, an oil field welder. I missed going to the Alaska pipeline by 15 minutes. A guy came to get me to go to Alaska with him to be on the pipeline. If I'd have done that, I'd have been history, okay? I stayed there. I got a job at the State Health Department in Oklahoma as an epidemiologist. I couldn't say epidemiology, let alone spell it. My father said, "What is that?" I said, "I don't know, but I'll find out," okay? I spent 17 years in the State Health Department doing rabies, scabies, head lice, and all those other things. Got an MPH, PhD in epidemiology. And one day the Commissioner of Health came to me and said, "You'd be a lot better, more effective for me if you were a physician." And I said, "I got the time if you got the money." She came up with the money. So I went through medical school, and I wanted to be a surgeon, but I was older, and I wasn't going to put 8 years in to do that. So I went into family medicine. And during that year, the occupational medicine program for Roy D. Hart was in the Department of Family Medicine. And I realized very quickly that I was much more tuned in with occupational medicine than I was with family medicine. I love to deliver babies. The last baby I delivered is 26 years old. It's my son. But I was an older person and switching over. And many people in occupational medicine today are switching from internal medicine, emergency medicine, and that sort of thing over into occupational medicine. Mid-career changes. In many respects, I did a mid-career change. So I spent 9 years then teaching up at the Medical College of Wisconsin, just north of here. It was a distance learning program where we taught 650 physicians how to do occupational medicine from an MPH, from a mass public health standpoint. If you meet any of those and you talk to them about me, don't believe anything they say, but I will tell you that I sent all of them to the sewer treatment plant in their environmental health course. They all hated me for that, but they all learned from it. But then from there, I became a corporate medical director. Right over there, if you look out that window, there's a big, tall, white building, and I went to work at AMICO. First thing, number one thing you learn from today from me is when you do a job interview, ask if the company is for sale. Okay? Because I went to work for AMICO as the associate corporate medical director. Within 15 months, it was sold to BP, British Petroleum, and I became, well, this Oklahoma accent changed somewhat because I spent a lot of time in London. But anyway, I became the corporate medical director for BP. Fantastic experience. A lot. I got to see the world and that sort of thing, but not a lot of straightforward hands-on medicine. And the second thing that I would tell you is in occupational medicine, if you come from internal medicine, if you come from family medicine, we really thrive on that patient interaction. It's slightly different in occupational medicine. Today, there's a mix. In corporate medicine, you don't have as much of that. It's changing a lot. And so that's an area that you'll look at. Everybody strives to be a corporate medical director. It's not that shiny. It's fun. It's interesting. I saw the world. But it's different. And so, second point of my presentation is the fact everybody wants to do corporate medicine. Look at it and see before you jump into it. It's very interesting. It's administrative. It's taxing at times. I was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I had my passport in my briefcase at all times because you never knew where you were going to go. Then I got a wild hair. I packaged out, took their money, and tried to retire. That lasted 4 weeks. The family had a meeting and said, "You're getting under our feet. Would you go do something?" So I said, I've done public health. I've done academics, and I've done corporate. That's the three things that we do in occupational medicine. What else is there for me to do? What else for me to do is to combine those three into consulting. Please, come in and sit down. Anywhere you want to. We got more chairs, but we got some chairs up here, and I promise not to bite. We're informal, and we're going to stop for questions in a minute. All the questions, most of the questions are okay. So I've done the three things. So what in the world am I going to do now? I became a consultant, and I combined all three. And so I'm a consultant. I've been a consultant for 13 years now in occupational environmental medicine for an engineering company. And I address health issues, foodborne outbreaks, that sort of thing, a lot of litigation and that sort. We can talk about that. But the other thing is I work with young engineers and talk to them about health and health issues. Because, like one of my first projects was a plant blew up, a PVC plant blew up, burned, okay? And so these young engineers were going in, thermal engineers were going in to investigate what happened. What was the cause, root cause of that explosion? They're bogging out in the middle of this thing without any respiratory protection, without any consideration of what they might be exposed to. So, time out. That's not the way we do it. Let's do a safety plan. I said, that's a good idea. Let's do it. I said, well, get out of there. Okay, so we did it. That company that hired us to investigate their fire took our safety plan and adopted it, and everybody that went on that site had to follow our safety plan. We helped protect other people from getting exposed. And that's what we're all about. We're part of preventive medicine, not preventative. There's no A in there. If the third thing coming out of here, don't ever put an A in preventive medicine, okay? All right, please. So the thing is that we're looking at populations. A worker coming in to see you is a sample of one from a worker population. And so you're trained to, okay, what are the symptoms? What are we going to do about it? How are we going to treat it? How are we going to get them better? As an occupational medicine doc, you're going to do all those, and then you're going to say, is there something going on in that plant? Is there something that we can prevent? Can we prevent someone else from getting exposed, getting these symptoms, getting this condition? Okay? It's pretty straightforward. Let's take it one step further. That worker is a sample of one of that community from which those workers come from. We are in preventive medicine, and that includes the community. So one of the things that you'll hear in the conference that we're really trying to develop is a healthy workforce is a safe workforce. And a safe workforce is a healthy workforce. And those two combined make a healthy and safety community. A guy wears hearing protection at the plant. Why shouldn't that guy wear hearing protection when mowing the lawn, when running the chainsaw, when going hunting? You're all old enough to have kids. Hopefully you do. But how many of you have seen a kid stop when they got in the car and say, where's my seatbelt? We've built that into their mindset. We need to build health and safety into the mindset of the communities that we come from. So occupational medicine has allowed me to do some really fun things. I've got to do some different things. I've got to combine my medicine with other activities. My personal belief is that is the best way to do it, and that's what we do in occupational medicine. I'll stop right there. I'll field any questions and all questions. Don't be, there's no dumb question. Questions. How long did it take me? 21 years. I have 6 college degrees, okay? I'm pretty successful at that. I can take exams. But it's really practical. You use the practical experience. Everybody in the room did something besides medicine. I don't care if it's making coffee. I don't care if it's, being a server at a restaurant. Like I say, I was a welder. And, as a consultant, you'd think, what in the world, how can you draw on that experience? One of the first projects I did was welding rod exposures to welders and the fumes from welding rods. Can you imagine? There's not very many docs in the country that have been welders. There's 2 of us that I know of. Other questions? I've answered every question. They just want to hear Dan Samo. Okay. All right. Well, welcome to ACOEM. Feel free to tap into our resources, and let's see if we can get you involved in our organization. Thank you very, very much.
Good morning, folks. I'm Dr. Christopher Patterson. I'm the moderator. We're going to hear from 6 occupational physicians. We'll all give you a little bit of the story how we got into occupational medicine, a little bit about our various practices and what we do, and a few little tips and stories. Are you good to go, Dr.
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm ready.
All right.
Morning. So I think part of what you're going to realize as you go through this morning is how many different little niches there are in occupational medicine. And I'm going to talk about a niche that I built in occupational medicine, which is public safety medicine, which is essentially police, fire, correctional officers, and soon to be also EMS. So I'm going to talk to you about that, about the guidances that we write, the guidance standards and things that are out there to help you protect public safety workers. So that's what this is about. I'm supposed to tell you about my disclosures. Actually, I'm actively looking for people who want to bribe me. So if you know anybody, I'm available. And so let's see. My work, I should tell you a little bit about how I got here and why. So as Mark tells you, he has 6 college degrees. I just barely got mine. Sophomore year, I tried to flunk out of college. I came within 0.2 of a point. It was 1967. I was living in the fraternity. Give me a break. My roommate got 1/10 of a point closer to flunking out than I did. And as a result of that, in 1970, when I was applying to medical school, and so was everybody, because it was the only deferment left that you didn't, not the only one. You could go to medical school, you could go to dental school, or you could go to divinity school. Not a lot of applicants to divinity school. So all my art history friends were in medical school. So all of a sudden there was this huge bump. And guess who didn't get in? So I spent 2 years in Mexico, actually studied, passed part 1 on the boards, came back. So I ended up in Chicago, originally from New York and New Jersey. And then finished school, got my internship, did my residency in emergency medicine. Did emergency medicine for 12 years, realized that, well, actually, interesting. I realized a year ago, as we're doing one of the chapters in the police guide, so we're going to talk about it, sleep disturbances. It was mostly about obstructive sleep apnea, and we also talked about shift work disorder. I'm listening to this expert that we had in it. Oh, my God, that's me. You know, again, had I known, what could I have done? He says, nothing. Can't treat it. So anyway, I got out of the emergency room, and as I started an occupational medicine program up at Evanston Hospital, which is part of Northwestern, and so I walk in to my ER residency, which is one of 4 in the country at the time, and they said, oh, Samuel. He says, welcome. He says, you're in charge of EMS training. I said, great, what's that? He says, you're going to train the EMTs and paramedics. I said, oh, cool. So I went on to train for 20 years and trained most of the paramedics and EMTs on the North Shore. But then when I left the ER and went into OCMed, my firefighters came to me and says, well, why don't you be our doc? I said, okay. And so I was then invited to Phoenix. Phoenix is sort of the mecca of firefighter health. And after that, I was invited to join NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, which writes lots of documents, including all the sprinkler stuff and the hoses and the trucks and everything. But they have a whole section, 1500 group, which writes medically related standards. And so I was invited onto that the task group, and then onto the technical committee. And of course, you may see that I'm uncomfortable speaking. And so I did, of course, speak about firefighter standards a lot at these conferences and around the country. And then I sort of get these calls from people, I got this firefighter with this and that, what do I do? And then some guy calls me and says, well, I have this cop. I said, I don't want to do cops. But what do I do? So I said, I don't know, let me look. And I looked in the literature, and there was very little. I mean, out to see what was out there, and there wasn't anything. And I had, actually at that time, I had started the public safety medicine section here at ACOEM. And so I decided, well, I'm going to put together a task group for my section, and we're going to write police standards. And that was 11 years ago, and we've been writing them ever since, and we're going to talk about them extensively through the rest of the course. So that's how I get to be here in front of you. I have all these important things, faculty, I'm a fellow, I'm a section leader, I'm a director. They voted me onto the board of directors, much to Mark's chagrin. Party animal. It's my favorite. So any other thing is, if there's questions, interrupt, and I'll ignore you. So, this is important. This is every firefighter's dream, Beamer, 28 grand, fire hose, 300, knocking the glass out of this idiot's car, priceless. Yeah, that's, we all want to do that. So let's talk a little bit about some general principles. And one of the big things is, so why do you need standards or guidelines for anything? I mean, there's guidance standards for all kinds of things in occupational medicine. And why? I mean, who cares? What do you need it for? So part of it is everybody cannot reinvent the wheel. So you'll see when you learn about these standards, there's thousands of hours. I'm telling you, thousands of hours that go into writing these guidances, research and working through it and content, all kinds of work, which every doc is not going to do. So somebody does it, then you have it, and you can use it. So you don't have to redo all that stuff. The other reason is you want to have standardization of decision making. So imagine that, you're going to want to be a firefighter. So you go to town A and they say, oh no, you're way too old. And then you go to town B and they say, sure, but you really wanted to work in town A, right? Or you're going to go and you say, oh no, you can't do that because you have diabetes, right? And you go to the other town, they say, sure, because they have a different decision-making standard. Well, guess what that leads to? A lawsuit. Because I really wanted to be town A, and they wouldn't take me, but town B would, and so why wouldn't town A take me? And I'm suing you because you didn't take me. So if you standardize decision-making, everybody's on the same page, and that's a good thing. The other thing it does is it causes you to have, and this is, buzzword, I don't know if you're all familiar with ADA, but one of the things is you can't discriminate against somebody. There can't be any blanket exclusions. So you can't say, you have hypertension, you're out. You have seizure disorder, you're out. That's a blanket exclusion. Individualized assessment means I looked at you, and based on your specific case, you're out. That's okay. Or you're in. So that helps. These documents are individualized assessments. And the other thing is, if I have diabetes and I want to be a firefighter, can I? I can go to these documents and say, okay, if I have diabetes and I do A, B, C, D, E, F, I can be a firefighter. And I do that, and so I'm okay. Or you go and you say, oh, clearly I'm not going to make it based on these standards. So the persons affected will know what to expect. So those are all good things. So what are we going to evaluate with this stuff? So basically it's, can this person do the essential job tasks? That's an easy essential job function, essential job tasks, all kinds of different names for this. Easy to say, but not always so easy to define. Right? So if you're thinking about essential job task of a firefighter, what would be one of the things? He needs to be able to get up a ladder, right? And so I got this guy's 450 pounds. He gets up 2 steps, he stops, catches his breath, does another 2 steps, stops, has a Snickers bar, and eventually gets to the top. It takes him 45 minutes. And the problem is that in the fire service and in lots of jobs where you may run into things, people don't really define the job. They say, needs to be able to climb a ladder. What's missing? How fast? Right? It's a big difference. Big difference. So a lot of times you don't get a lot of help from the employer about what the job really is. But this is what you're supposed to be deciding is, can they do the job? Now really there's 2 questions and the other thing is, can they do it without risk to themselves, their coworkers, and the public? And in public safety, there are certain tasks that even though you may never have to do it, are considered essential. And if you can't do it, you can't do the job. Most policemen never take their weapon out of their holster except for target practice, except for qualifying in the range. Less than, I forget the number, but it's a tiny percentage, 10%, ever shoot their gun in the field. But in order to be a policeman, you have to be able to use it, qualify with it, otherwise you can't do the job. Even though the huge majority of them will never, ever, ever need to use their weapon. So remember that. So what's risk? That's a tough question. And even a harder question. What's acceptable risk? So risk is the chance of something happening. Right? And we always talk about this as the benefit-risk ratio. But risk is not bad. Risk is the chance of it happening. You have a harm-benefit ratio. It's a risk of either of those things happening. And what's the risk of you not being able to do the job? And so this becomes a very difficult question because it's not really a scientific question. Right? It's like, what is it? And what makes you unfit? So these are not necessarily so easy. So really there's two things that you need to look at when you're looking at people. And look, what I'm telling you here about policemen and firemen is the same for everybody. And indeed, when these two documents, especially the police one, which of course is mine, so it's of course much better, although I do write both of them, you can extrapolate to any job as long as you know what the job description is and say, okay, based on the job description I know, and I can read this chapter and it explains to me why this is important, I can extrapolate those concepts to any job. And we're working on making that, writing them actually down, but you can do it. So if you're physically unable to do the tasks, right? This is your police department, right? You've all met them. So physically unable to do the job means that, okay, I need to climb ladders. I only have one arm. Probably won't be able to do that. I'm a policeman. I need to be able to qualify with my weapon with both hands. Right? So there's some things that make you physically unqualified. Now, indeed, and let me get to this other thing first. The other thing, so that's one side. The other thing that makes you fit or not fit is a risk of sudden incapacitation. What is the chance that your medical condition is going to cause you to become suddenly incapacitated and unable to do your job? So those are the two things. Now, this risk of sudden incapacitation, I'll talk about this for a minute. 1% per year. Now, people say, where's that come from? I have no idea. Somebody made it up. But everybody uses it. And 1% a year means that if you are at more than a 1% per year greater risk of being incapacitated, that is unacceptable. Everybody says, well, that's really harsh. That's mean, right? If you go into the risk literature, and believe it, there is risk literature, God knows why, and they ask people things like, so how much risk are you willing to take living next to a nuclear power plant and getting cancer? And the answer is not 1 in 100. The answer is 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million. What risk are you willing to take that the person driving the school bus that your kid is on is going to become suddenly incapacitated? Trust me, it's way more than 1%, or less than 1%. It's 1 in 100,000, not 1 in 100. Part of why this 1% came around is that the chance of a 45-year-old male having a coronary event, which would be suddenly incapacitating, is 0.45%. Society so this risk is about what is society willing to accept as a risk. And society accepts that 0.45%. Because we don't fire everybody at the age of 45 and say, in safety sensitive job, and say, you're done, because, you have that risk. So we know that society accepts that much. So this is not irrational. It's twice that much. So this is a number. Again, there's no science. That's sort of the only explanation I've ever heard of why this exists. But it turns out that figuring out this is a lot easier than figuring out, is it that bad? is a lot easier than figuring out, are you physically capable of doing the job? I can go to literature, and I can do literature searches, and I can say, and we're going to use seizures a lot as an example, is I can tell you, I can figure out how long your risk of having another seizure, how long it takes till it drops below 1% per year, and what criteria you need to meet. Are you physically fit? I had knee surgery, and now I'm telling you, I can't climb ladders anymore. Why? Because it hurts. Okay, hurts. Let's see, is that objective or subjective? All right, so remember the difference. Subjective is what patient tells you. Objective is what you can see, feel, smell, taste. So when they tell you you're nauseous, subjective. When they puke on you, it's objective, right? So this is easier to do than the physically able to do the job. So, but as you use the document, you'll see a lot of times it just says, well, what we've been able to do is say, look, certain things, there's the ones who clearly can, the ones who clearly can't, and then there's all this stuff in the middle. So when we don't have real answers, then we start to go to, okay, here's a group that can, here's a group that can't, and the rest of them you got to figure out some other way to do it. So can they do the job, you might have to actually put them into a task to see if they can do it, which is easier said than done. Excuse me. So what are the most common issues? Did you steal my coffee? Jeez. No, I'll do water. Excuse me 1 sec. Don't go away. No, that's all right. This is better. This is healthier. My wife tells me that all the time. She says, oh, we're going to eat this. I said, why? It's healthy. What? So what are the most common issues that we deal with? So there are certain things that cause you inability to do your essential job functions or tasks. Hearing, right? You need to hear? Yeah. At what level? Much more difficult question. Vision, do you need to see? Yeah. How well? Much more difficult question. And all the orthopedic stuff, the knees, the shoulders, the backs. These are very common things that we deal with. And then there's the risks of sudden incapacitation. This is more the medical diseases. So it's the cardiovascular, diabetes, hypoglycemic reactions, respiratory stuff, asthma, seizures, and things like that. So these are the two areas and the most common things that we run into. Now let's talk a little bit about the different guidelines that are out there. That's not me. Although I will admit, or not admit, it was great. I've been in the burning buildings with the firefighters, and actually at this conference every year we have a field trip where we go to the fire academy, whatever city we're in. And back when we first started doing this, maybe about 10 years ago, we were in Philly, and they actually took us in to the live fire drill. So I'm crawling in full gear with the chief, and they got this hay burning in the back. And it's all smoky, and I'm in the gear, so I'm crawling in. He says, okay, now what we're going to do is you're going to take the hose, and you're going to shoot it up at the ceiling, because it makes steam, and it puts out the fire, or something like that. So I go like this, and I look up, and I say, oh, my God, there is fire on the ceiling, all the way back to where we came in, on the ceiling. This is a concrete structure. This is not going to burn down around my ears, happily. But I'm going, what am I doing in here? And actually, the reason we take docs on this tour is just for that. So you understand what this job is. So if you're working with a group of people, you really sort of need to know what the job is. And I don't recommend going into burning buildings. One of my departments tried to kill me in a burning building. And at this age, trust me, I'm not doing it anymore. So firefighter guideline really is this one. It's NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, 1582, Standard on Comprehensive Occupational Medical Pro Fire Departments. It's actually, this is the old one, the 2013 version is the newest. It's a document that's in constant revision. It's the NFPA document that is the most revised. As soon as we finish one, we start revising it. Now, NFPA works through this ANSI standards process, which is just painfully Byzantine. I mean, it is, oh, God, it's awful. And I've been doing it since 1996, and I still don't get it. And it's something, we have to do it, and then it gets go out for public comment, and then it comes back in, and you got to respond to the comments, and then you come again, and then you can't do anything, and it's like, I just go to the meetings and talk about the medical stuff. So this was really the first thing was out there, but it's for firefighters. And then the question is, what police guidelines are out there? And I was told you when the first time people called me, I said, I don't know. So I looked around, and actually when I looked around, I found this thing called the California Post, which is police officers standard something. And it was actually a pretty good document. And I said, well, the California Post says this. Oh, no, that's California. We're in Missouri, or we're in New York, even worse, And we don't do California stuff, crystals and stuff. So that, a lot of people were resistant to that. And then I looked around and see, well, what other states had stuff, right? So then there was, which is this one? This is, New York, yeah. So this is about diabetes. I just took the sections from all these different state ones that are around there, and it says, requires a case-by-case assessment of diabetes. That's it. That's all they gave you, right? This is the whole thing. This is it. Kentucky, case-by-case assessment. That's a lot of help, isn't it? Massachusetts, category A, category B. We talk about this is like they cut and pasted this from NFPA, which is about firefighters, not policemen. Right? Here's my favorite. Mississippi, to within a known degree of moral certainty. They didn't know me in college, So this is what was out there. I mean, this is it. So I said, okay, we're going to write a better one. We're going to do something for police that's more along the lines of NFPA, or actually the California Post, which is really good. The problem with California Post, it sort of had all this great research and gave you all this data and stuff, and then just sort of never drew the line in the sand. They never said, okay, and here's what you do, for a lot of the stuff that they did. So we started this, I think 10 or 11 years ago. It's called Guidance. We were going to say guidelines. The board said, oh, no. Guidance for the Medical Evaluation of Law Enforcement Officers. And this is the link to it. Actually, if you go to the ACOEM page, it's a subscription. It's a web-based subscription document, which also we did on purpose because NFPA is a print document. And with their system, the fastest that they can then change anything in there is probably 4 years. This I can change in 4 seconds, if once I get all the approvals. But this is quick. It's web-based, and it's a subscription thing. So you got to pay money for it. That's my disclosures. Is that ACOEM does pay when we have our meetings, which we do a lot. They will pay for us to go to the meetings. In the beginning, we pay for ourselves to go to the meetings, but now they actually will cover our costs. So this is, and it's on ACOEM.org. It's on the front page. You can link to it. So what we did is we decided that's the royal we. The royal we decided that what I really was looking for was to create a real consensus document that involved all stakeholders in this process. To wit, we invited the International Association of Chiefs of Police, to be actual part of the task group, to sit at the table and work with us and help us do that and have input. Part of which is if we're having the arguments at the table as we're writing it, we're not going to have the arguments after we publish it and then have to have the arguments in court, that we have a consensus before it comes out. So IACP joined us, NAWLE, which is National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives. There's a whole lot of stuff about discrimination against women, especially in police and fire, has a lot to do with the strength thing, and it's mostly about upper body strength. And so there's a lot of physical aptitude things that really discriminate against women. And so we wanted them to be part of this too. International City County Managers Organization, they're interested. They pay for this. They're kind of interested. And actually in the beginning we had NAPO, which is the National Association of Police Organizations, a police union, and they were there for several years and helped us build, especially the beginning part of it, which had to do with the scope and the essential job tasks. And then they decided, well, they really shouldn't be part of it because they didn't want to endorse it, politics. But they were really, really helpful. I didn't tell you that because they don't want me to mention their name. So it was a police union organization. So invite in for each specific chapter a advocacy group. And the first chapter we attacked was diabetes. And so I invited the American Diabetes Association to join us, and they came. 3 endocrinologists and a lawyer with a chip on their shoulder this big. You can't discriminate against, you can't, I'm saying, whoa. We're just trying to find out how we can get them back. Which ones can. We know some can do it, and we need to define who they are, because we know some can't, and we know some can, and we have to decide how can we determine that. So after their second or third full-day meeting with them, they finally realized that we were all on the same side, and they became amazing partners for us. And this was our first big chapter, and it was excellent. Of course, I'm a little biased, just a little bit, to the point where ADA, when DOT, the Department of Transportation, was making their stands for truck drivers, ADA says, look at this. This is what you should be doing. They kept pushing our chapter and all regulatory bodies, said this is how it should be done. And we had the Heart Association join us, especially for the deaf. There's more of them. I haven't updated this. Epilepsy Foundation. Now, it doesn't always work out so well. So Epilepsy Foundation came with 2 epileptologists and 3 lawyers and said, someone has a seizure, in 3 months they can go back and do everything they want. So, whoa, that's cool. Based on what science is that? Well, there was this article I think it was out of Colorado, where they showed that people who had seizures didn't have more accidents after 3 months than they did after 6 months, and therefore everybody can go back to do everything at 3 months. And I look at and we had done a lot of research before they arrived, and we had all kinds of stuff. And the mother of this, each of our chapters has a mother, and that's not gender biased. It can be guys or girls. And the mother of this chapter was Beth Meese, and she's, we had talked about this, and she's like, what? And she was all angry. I said, Beth, well, calm down. So we look at their epileptologist, and I said, do you think that their risk of recurrent seizure is less than 1% at 3 months? So, oh, no. Next time was a different epileptologist. Same thing. Next time was a different one. But their executive director was a lawyer. This is it. And my group, my task group, is 10 docs. And one time they said, they never see me lose my temper. This time I did. I said, okay, look, if you're going to do this, just go. And then we got this great guy from NIH who helped us finish his chapters also. Excellent. We're going to go into that in specifics. How am I doing here, by the way? Am I doing good? Got another 4 hours? Okay. Yeah, captive. They would say, can you come and talk? I said, sure, how long? I can do anything from 3 minutes to 3 days. Take your pick. Okay, so we wanted this to be a consensus document. We wanted it to be evidence-based as much as possible. And we clearly said, sometimes there is no evidence. This is a great study. It was in New England Journal of Medicine. And it was like, the study of the efficacy of parachutes when you jump out of an airplane, and there's no evidence to support that because there's no double-blind, placebo-controlled study of people jumping out of airplanes without the parachute. So, evidence-based, yes. And if we have it, and trust me, the thing is, our document is referenced out the yin-yang. If there isn't, we'll say, look, we come to this as a consensus of the group based on da-da-da-da-da, or we just say, we don't know. And that's one thing, actually I've learned to be comfortable saying, I don't know. Because as I get older, I realize more and more that I know less and less. It seems weird, You get better at what you do and you know less about it. We try as much as possible to give the line in the sand, saying that, here is the cutoff. Now, sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can find it, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's these can, these can't, and then there's the gray stuff in the middle. But we try to define at least whatever lines we can define. So the way this is mostly built is that up front in each chapter, it's, if you have diabetes or you've had a heart attack and you want to come back, you have to do A, B, C, D, E. Simple, straight. And then there's 30 pages of appendix if you want to know why we came up with A, B, C, D, E. And so there's lots of specifics. And then in the appendix is also, we figured the appendix should be somewhat educational, too. And so there may be things about the latest way to treat diabetes or whatever. And so that'll show up in the chapter also. But, you go to it and you say, I need to know now because I got this guy in my office and I got to make a decision and the chief is calling me. I can look and see quickly. I don't have to go through 40 pages to figure out what the answer is. And we did this. This just kind of works out pretty cool. There's a whole question that says, well, Joe Schmo had a seizure, went to his family doctor. His doctor says, okay, to return to work. Right? And, excuse me? And you're going to realize that you, as the provider, as the police provider, as the fire provider, whatever it is, you're making the decision, not their doctor. Because whose side is their doctor on? Who's he going to lie for? Right? Doc, I need to go back. Right? Or conversely, oh, Doc, I can't go back to work because, it hurts behind my left ear every third Tuesday for 30 seconds. Right? So I can't do my job, Doc says, so I can't do his job. You'll see that all the time. So you can't depend on them. But what we did do is said, I need data from you. So a lot of the chapters have a form that you can send to the provider saying, please give me this data. This is the data I need. I don't want your opinion if they can come back. I just want the data. So that's in each chapter. And that's working out pretty well so far. And then every chapter is supposedly well annotated and referenced. This actually has nothing to do with anything, but I thought it was kind of cute. And that was, by the way, Friday night. We went out to dinner, and I bring my car back, and it's like covered in snow. I think, what? But you want to say about Chicago weather? So if you don't like it, wait 15 minutes. So what has been done? So this is about the police guides. What chapter was done? So diabetes was our first one, big one. The whole chapter on vision, and it addresses everything. It's near vision, it's distant vision, it's surgeries, it's radial keratitis, all that stuff in there. It's color visions in there. That's a tough one. And how do you test color vision? I mean, I sit at these meetings and I was like, God, I didn't realize this was so complicated. Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? No. And how you test it, is it Ishihara using Farnsworth or this? What are you doing? So it's a whole big deal. And is it important? It turns out it's probably more important for police than it is for fire. In fire, it's hot. You can't see anyway, because it's full of smoke, right? But police is like, chase the light blue car and get the guy in the light green jacket, all right? Or in the bomb squad, cut the blue wire. All right, so it becomes important. So vision stuff, hearing. So I'm a deaf man, so they made me do this chapter. Oh, it's impossible. Because so we sort of have this is the two ends, but the two ends of this is clearly can do it and clearly can't do it are really far out there. So I have normal hearing, great, you can do the job. I'm damn near deaf, you can't do the job. But this part in the middle is huge. It's just huge. And then, like I have low-frequency hearing loss in this year and high-frequency loss in this year. I have a hearing aid. Am I allowed to wear a hearing aid? There's all kinds of different issues. Now, if you go into a fire with a hearing aid, is it going to melt in your ear? We don't know. No. Is it going to help? Does it make any difference? If asymmetrical hearing loss, trust me, I have asymmetrical hearing loss. I cannot localize sound. One day I'm at home, years ago, my kids had some little, something, timer or something, and it's going beep, beep, beep. I'm home alone. Beep, beep. So I know it's either in the kitchen or a little porch place there. Beep, beep, beep. 25 minutes I'm looking for this thing. Beep, beep, beep. My wife walks in. She walks over the counter. She picks it up and says, "Why didn't you turn this off?" Oh, I wanted to kill her. So all these kinds of things that you need to think about. So does it matter to a policeman or fireman? It goes, hear that gun click? Right? There's the crying baby in the burning building that you're going to only find by sound. All right? So these are issues. There's a cardiovascular chapter which covers everything, from arrhythmias to coronary artery disease, hypertension, the whole 9 yards, cardiomyopathies. And actually we have some pretty good lines in the sand, and also about, I had a heart attack, can I come back? Or I had a stent, can I come back? All that's in there. It's really good. Any of you recognize this guy? I didn't. Don't feel bad. I just thought it was a cool picture. Schistosomiasis, So the whole thing about infectious diseases, what things you can and cannot work with. A lot about HIV. Part of it is, especially in police, where you may be bleeding on other people. When is that safe? When are you safe to be working with the public? We have a medication chapter, and this is a chapter that's sort of unique in what we call it, standardom. Is there a word, standardom? The world of standards? And this chapter has pretty much every medication formerly in the United States. And it says whether you're safe to take the medication while you're working, or if not, how much time do you need until you can go back to work, or can you never work on this? So things like Coumadin. Right? If you're anticoagulated, both police and fire, you're done. Because the risk of intracranial bleeds from minor head trauma, which especially police have all the time, is a reason. So this is a pretty cool chapter. And actually, this is a chapter, you can use this to, clearly, go to other safety-sensitive jobs or any other jobs. If there's a question about, can you come back? I'm taking Norco, Flexeril, hydrocodone, That's one of my soapboxes. We won't get on that one. And then we actually developed probably the first pregnancy chapter. And this gets real tied up in legality because there are several laws that say that you cannot restrict someone because they're pregnant. And so what we decided to do is what we did, and we talked about all that and the problems, but at the end of this chapter is a handout for the pregnant officer or firefighter, which says, look, here are the risks. Your exposures to this, to that. It's for policemen. It's going to the firing range. There's lead and there's copper and there's all kinds of other stuff, right? It's the exposures to this and that. And then for firefighters, you're exposed to. Here are the risks. It's your choice. Here's the risks in the first trimester, the second trimester, third trimester, lactating, postpartum. These are the risks. You decide. And hey guys, we got seats over here where you can see, but then I might call on you. Watch out for that. So this changed very recently. This has changed. When the prosthetics went from that to this, is now really for police and fire with below the knee amputations. Most of them come back. It's a big long chapter. It talks about stump health and all kinds of different things, and so it's about what kinds and what level of amputations. That it's an individualized assessment. But a lot of people function very well. Now, for police, it's one thing. You're going to run and chase and fight, that's great. Firefighters, another thing is like, will you be able to walk on a slanted surface, like on a roof? And sometimes, with the older prosthesis, the answer was no. But now with the new things, with the computer ankles and stuff in them, they're pretty cool. And so a lot of the answers are yes. Still with upper extremity, not so much. We have a chapter on sleep disorders. Mostly at this point, it's OSA and shift work disorder. It's actually part of the neurology chapter. We have and the mother. I want you to know that the mother of the substance abuse chapter is right here. Here's a picture of him studying for the course.
Field work.
So he did a lot of field research on this, and it's an excellent chapter. It really is. And it's again, you have someone who has substance abuse, alcohol, drugs. When can they come back? What are the criteria that if you have this diagnosis, if it's abuse versus addiction versus I don't know, he'll tell you what it is. When can you come back? Brand new ones, we just did a whole chapter on initial evaluation. When you first see them, what are you looking for? And it has all kinds of forms you can use, the history forms, the physical forms. And history forms are interesting. It's like, so I ask you, do you have asthma? And then 2 pages later, do you wheeze? I don't have asthma, but I wheeze whenever I run or whatever, So it asks several questions, several ways. So are they lying, or they just don't get it? And, it goes both ways. So lots of forms. And then there's things about, so if you could do a PAT, a pre-placement, not aptitude, aptitude, so physical aptitude test. Their doctor needs to sign off, so because they're not hired yet, this is part of the application process. Their doctors say it's okay for them to do it, and it sort of describes what each department is telling what it involves. But then it says, by the way, doc, think about these things before you sign that. Think about heart disease, think about cardiomyopathy, think about sickle cell, think about different things that may make this really bad. And a lot of guys die in these tests or get really sick. They get myoglobinemia, they get renal failure, all kinds of cute things because they have some underlying conditions. We did finally come up with a seizure chapter. That was the longest birth of every chapter. We were in labor for 4 or 5 years on this chapter, but it is an excellent chapter, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in specifics. And coming soon, we got stuff musculoskeletal. Knee is actually done and been submitted to the board for approval. Shoulder is in work. Spine is, we're thinking about it a lot. Bomb squad chapter is done and gone off to the board. So, and a lot of this is with the different special. So the main document says this is for patrol officers. Bomb squads are not patrol officers, different. So there's some different things. But then we'll say, okay, it's all the same except for, your color vision may need to be different. They wear different gear, and so how does that affect certain things? We do regular updates on all of our chapters because medicine changes, and so there's a big update on diabetes and stress. I can't tell you how many hours we discussed about this stuff. Some updates on color vision and stereopsis, and the medication chapter is always being updated because as new medications get added, we got to add them. Things that we're working on now, correctional officers, so they're police officers, but a whole different workspace, and so this is will be a little different. Doing TAC teams. We're going to actually do EMS. Now, EMS is typically fire, but NFPA is not going to, they're just not nimble enough to be able to start a whole new document there. So we're going to do this through ACOEM, which would be cool. Clan labs, lots of nasty toxicology in clan labs. We're in the middle of doing a psych chapter. This will be difficult but interesting, I think, because, what diagnoses mean you're done forever? I'm a narcissistic sociopath. You can't be a cop. You could be president, but it's a different job, You don't have your hand. You don't have a weapon in your hand. You do have your finger on a button, though. So this will be an interesting chapter that we're working on. Working pulmonary asthma. We're pretty close to done, and we're going to do COPD. We've been talking about writing a chapter about risks for 10 years. We're still talking about it. It's just so difficult. And seizures. So seizures just came out, and I'm going to sort of talk a little bit more specific so you get an idea of what it does, what it says. So first of all, I got a couple of case studies. Let me just read those off to here somewhere. Okay, so when I got a policeman who had a seizure 1 week and then another seizure 1 month after a traumatic brain injury, a head injury. That's case number 1. Case number 2 is a doc, so as I'm saying, it doesn't have to be, it's a doc who had a new, single, unprovoked temporal lobe seizure. Okay? Unprovoked, only one, single seizure. And the third one is a steel worker who had 2 seizures while he was asleep at age 10. He's now 24 years old. He's never had another seizure. He's not on any medications, but he just tells you that he bites the tip of his tongue often at night. So remember those. I'll read them again at the end, but we're going to go through this and we'll go over those again. So what does the seizure chapter say? Really, there's 3. Now, I'm telling you, part of it was to break it down into how there's 67,000 different kinds of seizures. And we tried to figure out how we're going to talk about each one, and oh my God, it was a nightmare trying to organize it. We finally came to this. There's 3 things. There's provoked seizures, there's single unprovoked seizures, and there's epilepsy. And that's how we broke it down. So within provoked seizures, which means that there was something that identifiable that caused the seizure. So there's seizures that have a low risk of recurrence. And those are seizures that are caused by medications, like, I took something that made me seize. I was coming off my barbiturate addiction and it made me seize. Now, there may be other things about why they had the seizure that you may want to look at, but as far as seizures, these are unlikely to recur again. Toxins, transient metabolic things, I was, hypoglycemic or eclampsia, withdrawals, and less than 7 days after I had trauma. So these are low risk of recurrence. So it's a single provoked seizure with low risk of recurrence. And then there's those with a high risk, single provoked seizure with a high risk of recurrence. If you have seizure more than 7 days after you had trauma, you're likely to have more seizures. Any intracerebral, intracranial hemorrhage is going to put you at a high risk. Brain infections, brain surgery, basically anytime you go through the dura, you're at high risk. Any structural tumors or, AVMs, things like that. And the bottom one's rare, but some autoimmune diseases in their active phase, when they're active, can have high risk of recurrence. So what do you do? And then there's single unprovoked seizure, which means it's a seizure. I don't know why. I'm sorry. Okay. So if you have a single unprovoked seizure and you have a normal EEG, normal labs, normal MRI, everything's normal. This is how long it takes until your risk of having a second seizure is less than 1%. And people say, well, that's kind of harsh, isn't it? You know what the risk? So if you have a single unprovoked seizure, 50% of those people will never have another seizure in their life. So, then you're going to restrict all those 50%, you're going to restrict them, and they're never going to have another seizure in their life. But I don't know which of those people it is. So you guys will and you guys won't. But I don't know. Maybe it's you will and you won't. You will. So there's no way to tell. So you have to be, with a normal exam of single unprovoked seizure, it's 5 years on or off medication. Now, if you're on medication and then you go off, it's 5 years from when you go off medication. And then they go back to work. If they have abnormal workup, single unprovoked seizure, so if an leptogenic pattern on their EEG or their abnormal MRI, then they're treated as if they have epilepsy. And we'll go into that. So their risk increases tremendously. Definition of epilepsy is they have 2 or more seizures more than 24 hours apart. You have one provoked seizure at high risk, that's treated like epilepsy. An unprovoked seizure with abnormal tests, that's treated like epilepsy. And then these are some weird, forget those. You might hear of one once in your life. So if you have epilepsy, when can you return to work? Have to be seizure-free for the most recent 10 consecutive years. Your risk of a second seizure, or in this case, of having a recurrent seizure, doesn't go under 1% for that long. That you're on it and you're being treated and you have no adverse effects from the medication, or you're seizure-free 10 years and you've been off medication for 5, the most recent 5 years. Okay? So that's with this good science behind that. And so we know why we're doing that. If they had surgical treatment of seizures, you treat them like epilepsy, and the 10 years starts from the surgery date. So that's what the chapter, I mean, it's like that. It's very clear. Now, understand this is a 30-page chapter. So there's a whole lot of appendices in there, and you know, that's, you all get that? So there's Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix A is, it talks about classifications, and it discusses epilepsy in great detail. And then Appendix B is the form for the doc, for the treating doc. So, and then, of course, there's 3 pages of references in the chapter. Now, don't tell anybody. Don't tell Mark, but I gave you a copy of the chapter. It's in your handout of the seizure chapter, so you can really get an idea of what these chapters are like. So it's in your little handouty thing, a little card. So let's go back to the case studies again. So what are you going to do? The police officer with a seizure 1 week and 1 month following a head injury. Can they work? No. We agree with her? No? No. How long? How long? 2 seizures, it's epilepsy, it's 10 years. It's 10 years. Seizure-free. No. The doc with the new single unprovoked temporal seizure, let's assume she has a normal workup. 5 years. If she has an abnormal workup, it's 10 years. The steel worker, I love this one, you know. So he's had these 2 seizures when he was a kid, you know, nocturnal seizures. They only get them when they're asleep. It's not that it's at night, it's when you're asleep. And not on any meds, but he bites the tip of his tongue a lot. Well, what do you think is happening? Another clue is that if you ever get a patient that says, gee, I woke up in the morning and my shoulder was dislocated, or I had a humeral fracture, and they probably had a seizure. Most it's a sign of seizures. I got to know what's going on with this guy. He needs a workup. And I don't have the answer, right? So you're going to work him up. So he needs an EEG, he needs an MRI, you need to see what's going on. And even if it's all normal, is he having seizures? And just because it's only this little tongue biting at night doesn't mean that they won't generalize. We thought, well, if you only have nocturnal seizures, to be okay because it's night when you're asleep and you're not driving your car or shooting people when you're asleep. And so you should be okay. But actually the epileptologist from NIH says, yeah, but the problem with that is that those things can generalize. They can turn into generalized seizures. And so it becomes, it is still a seizure disorder. Okay. So, any questions? This is Halloween on Halsted Street in Chicago. If you're ever in Chicago around Halloween, this is a trip. When it first went, it was like, 10 people in costumes and 30 people watching. Now there's hundreds of people marching in this parade and tens of thousands watching. And trust me, none of them are drinking. So questions, yeah. All of that's in the medication chapter. Yeah, so part of it is like, you can take this and you can work. You can take this and you can work after a certain break-in period. You can, you want me to leave?
No, I want to get at the computer. You keep talking.
Okay.
That's your job.
I can talk. So, there's 5 different categories of, this you can work if you haven't taken it for, it's usually 2 half-lives, so it depends on the medication. And some of them you can't work at all.
Are these the only chapter?
So the updates, so what happens, because it's a web-based thing, so if you're a subscriber and we update something, everybody subscriber gets an email that, hey, we updated this, and you can get at it at any time. And that's the thing is I don't have to send you a new copy of it. It's done. And so it's quick and easy. It's so much nicer than the fire thing. Yes?
So just 2 months ago, we had a chemical plant operator who had a single unprovoked seizure, went through the whole gamut, every test was normal. The neurologist was going back and forth with the contract op doc, and the conclusion they came up with was, okay, after 3 months, you're good to go back to climb rail cars and do all that. So you're saying that should have been 5 years?
Well, if he's in a safety-sensitive position, if it endangers himself, his coworkers, the public, for him to have a seizure, then yeah, it needs to be restricted. If you have a seizure and I'm an office worker, or I'm not climbing I'm not working the steel. I'm not climbing over boiling vats of steel. It's okay. It's just what's going to happen if he has a seizure. If he becomes suddenly incapacitated, is that going to really matter? I mean, it matters, but it may not affect his safety or the safety of those around him. So when you're applying these concepts to other jobs, that's it. How important is it? So for me, if I have a seizure, nobody cares. If I'm post-ictal, it's my normal behavior state. Uh-oh, Speedy's here. This woman.
Why does everybody make fun of me?
Because it's easy.
I can never think about Rodney Dangerfield of occupational medicine.
She talks so fast.
Didn't
She
last
can.
night.
That's because you were drunk. She can give you twice as much information in the same period of time as I can, and she's very knowledgeable. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
You made a statement that somebody who's on anticoagulants, and you said, they can be in the brain, so they're off. But I am thinking, if somebody had a DVT because he had a fracture and he happened to get a DVT and he happened to be on anticoagulation for this many months, it's not a permanent disqualification. So I want your comment.
No, I mean, so saying he gets off anticoagulation, he's fine. It's the anticoagulant that's the issue, right? It's not the DVT. The DVT is not going to make you suddenly incapacitated. It's the medication. So as long as yeah, but that won't make you suddenly incapacitated. So you have a risk of recurrence, but if I get another DVT, it's not going to make me become suddenly incapacitated. I'll end up being off work, but it doesn't endanger me, my coworkers, or the public. So you're higher risk of having a recurrence, but doesn't take you off the job. It's the medication that takes you off the job.
I sort of look at both the condition which necessitates anticoagulation therapy, a catheter repair, that by itself is disqualifying, or if you're an anticoagulant for that kind of reason, definitely a permanently disqualifying. Whereas if it's for a shorter term, it's only for short term, they are all not on duty.
Yeah. Then they're just off as long as they're on the anticoagulation. So, of course, then guys are forced with the decision, do I stay on the anticoagulant, reduce my risk of having a recurrent DVT and a PE, or do I, and not work, or do I stay off the medication, So if I stay on the medication, and which is better for me medically, I can't work, or do I take the risk of recurrence so I can work? And that's a toughie.
Like there's California, of course, says you can work with, based on why you're on it, like if somebody's on anticoagulants for DVT or whatever, they say you can work. And they say, in case somebody should bleed, it's an EMT position or whatever, you immediately can, we have means to stop the bleeding, and then we can also hospitalize. So they say you can.
See, but does it make any sense, though? Does it make any sense? It says, okay, so if you bleed into your head, we have ways of treating it. Great, we can drill a hole in your head. But, I'm sorry. The point is that when you bleed into your head, all of a sudden, and for police, the big thing about becoming suddenly incapacitated is you lose control of your weapon. You talk to every police organization, unions, everybody, you may never lose control of your weapon. So you bleed into your head and you're laying on the ground, you do not have control of your weapon. Period. And so it doesn't make any sense to say, if you're anticoagulated for DVT, it's okay, but if you're anticoagulated for FIB, you're not okay. It's not about the underlying disease.
It's just becomes difficult for a practicing physician as to which guideline you're going to follow. If
Use ours, we're better.
That's one thing. If that's one thing, I won't be looking at California folks. So.
Yeah, they're wrong. But not most. It's a good document. Okay. One quick one.
Yes. Regarding the deputies and the police officers, is there, or the drivers, should we come up with any consensus? What should be the number or regarding that insulin therapy?
So, talk specifically about what you have to do in order to work as a and Natalie will talk about truck drivers, but it says, you need to be on a basal bolus system. You can't have had a hypoglycemic reaction. You can't have, there's a whole list of things that you must or must not have. And if you do all those, then you're safe. Then your risk of having of a hypoglycemic reaction is no more than the general public. And if you fulfill all those requirements, then you're good. So it talks about what type of regimen you're on, your control. It starts out, it says the well-motivated, well-educated, well-controlled diabetic can be a police officer. All right? But you have to prove that you meet those three things.
Ben, will you be available at the end for questions?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be. What time is the end?
The end is 12. I'm just getting to that. So we have 3 hours here. We're going to have one more speaker, Natalie, and then we'll have a 15-minute break after that, and there'll be some more speakers after that.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, or I guess it's still morning. I was asked to talk about how different people do occupational medicine in different settings. And about 4 years ago, I think when this session first started, there were 5 occupational medicine physicians who were on the panel presenting how they got to where they got in this practice. And I made a mistake, called up Dr. Roberts, and I said, there really are some women in occupational medicine. I learned my lesson. Next year, I was on this panel and giving one of the presentations. So the point is, volunteer or don't volunteer, but you're going to end up getting sucked in anyway. So this is really saying I started out not thinking about occupational medicine. I, like most people, had no idea what occupational medicine was. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my path and how I got to where I got to. If I can figure out, you showed me what to do.
This one here.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
I was close. So after my disclosure slide, and there's no disclosure necessary for what do I do. So I started out pre-law. I really liked legal stuff. I liked the challenge. I liked the regulations. And somehow in undergrad, I just decided I didn't like law school. Didn't want to go to law school. Didn't like poli-sci, but maybe medicine would be kind of fun. Or actually, I thought maybe med tech would be kind of fun because I didn't think I could get into med school. So anyway, went and did my medical school at Temple in Philadelphia. Ended up doing internal medicine residency, part of it in Philly, part of it in New Orleans at Charity Hospital, back when Charity was opened, before it was destroyed by Katrina. And I spent some time as an emergency room physician. I knew I wanted to go back home to Philadelphia. Didn't really know what I wanted to be doing at that time. Did I want to be an internist? Did I want to do teaching? Interviewed at Helene Fold Hospital. Did I want to work for a pharmaceutical company in research? Because I thought that might be kind of cool. And I found an ad for a little OCMED clinic not far from where I was living. And I said, you know what? Why not give it a try for a year? That was the beginning. And I started realizing that a lot of occupational medicine was regulatory. There were a lot of legal pieces to it. And the more and more involved I got, the more I kept reaching out to develop a network. And you'll hear the word network talked about a lot here. A lot of what you do in occupational medicine is not what you know. It's who you know. So I decided I need to reach out and find out who I could ask questions for DOT exams. Because, I was doing those DOT exams back then. And I found a guy called Washington, D.C., and someone at the FHWA. And I started talking to Ellie and Viner, who would fax me, in the olden days, fax me the paperwork so that I could have a better understanding of what the FHWA meant. And they started talking to other physicians in the area. And, kind of kept getting more and more involved there, and then showed up at an ACOEM meeting for the very first DOT course. And someone said, you want to do it? Want to be involved? And I'm like, sure, I'm an internist. I understand things like cardiology and pulmonary, and I can do that. So that's how I got sucked into that. So when I was first there at that single-site clinic, I was just doing a ton of DOT exams and lots of workers' compensation and lots of surveillance. And suddenly I'm pulling out Federal Register announcements. I'm pulling out Code of Federal Regulations. I'm talking to lawyers about all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. It's kind of what I wanted to do, but a little different, kind of cross the medicine with it. We didn't really have a lot of the issues with the ADA back then. We didn't deal with HIPAA back then. And believe it or not, in the beginning, we didn't even deal with drug testing back then. Because those were in the days prior to all the drug testing regulations coming out. What was really nice, and I liked about OCMED, no really sick patients, really no call, very rare if ever they called me after hours, and it was kind of fun. So I decided to stay with it. As I mentioned, came to an AOHC meeting. Next thing I knew, I'm involved with one of the training programs. Next thing I knew, someone said to me, you're going to go to a meeting in D.C. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And they were like, why not? I don't want to go to D.C. went to D.C., went to an FHWA negotiator rulemaking committee, and realized that, what we think is right may not be what's right in somebody else's mind. And I think that's the one lesson I learned a lot, is that we know how X should be done because we're occupational medicine physicians. However, if you ask the safety people, they know a different way it should be done. And you talk to the lawyers, and there's a different way because there's a regulation, there's a law, there's precedent, or there isn't. And if there isn't a law, we shouldn't be doing it that way. So there's lots of different stakeholders involved, so we've got to understand that we have to look at it from various viewpoints. Along the way, I figured I better know what I'm doing. So I did my Master's of Public Health at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Went to Wisconsin twice, for orientation and graduation. It was one of those really, really amazing experiences because not only did I learn about all the topics, but I made the beginning of my more expanded network. Learning not just who was in the program with me, but also the faculty from MCW. So again, the more you get involved, the more that you do, the more you learn, the bigger that network becomes. At that point, I came back, and I was recruited to work as a plant physician at a pharmaceutical company. Real interesting experience because my director was a gastroenterologist who did not understand occupational medicine. And I had a couple of grievances filed against me because I had a gentleman who had back pain. Driving a Miata, okay, Miata, a little teeny tiny car, getting in and out of it. I can't get in and out of a Miata. He could. I arranged to get him a sit-stand desk because all he had to do was watch the conveyor belt and push the buttons and stand up and sit down and move around whenever he needed to with no lifting. But he didn't like that. And my boss felt that you had to embrace the employees and be their friends. Lesson learned. As an occupational medicine physician, you have to be fair. You have to be equitable. And you may not be anybody's friend. The key thing is to do the right thing. And are there going to be times where you're going to find you've just got to leave a job because you can't do the right thing? I left Merck because I couldn't do the right thing. And back to the OCMED clinic. Dr. Roberts again. We keep running into each other.
I've already been here. I've already made this.
Okay. So now you got me confused. So I got back to the clinic that I was. The old saying of what can we do to get you to come back? More pay, less hours. They gave it to me. I went back. It was great. And then I became medical director of 3 center occupational medicine clinics where we were working primarily on the surveillance programs. But I was bored. Recruited at an AOHC meeting by Dr. Marsha Comstock, who was the corporate medical director of Conrail. Conrail, for those of you who probably don't know, was a Class 1 railroad located really in the Mid-Atlantic East Coast part of the country. It was purchased, split up, went to Norfolk Southern and CSX several years ago. But I recruited and went to Conrail. Another whole different animal because the regulations were different. The unions were different. The workers' compensation was totally different. And I had to work with all the different teams, and not somebody, I'm going to ignore that, the different teams I had to work with. Labor relations, HR, legal, safety, operations. All these different stakeholders wanted different things. Operations didn't really care. As long as he's relatively safe, I need him running my train. HR just wanted the people hired and didn't really want to deal with any arguments. Labor relations were like, do we have to take him out of service? And so it really was understanding that all those different stakeholders aren't wrong. They just have different viewpoints. And then the fun stuff started. The regulations on drug testing came into effect. I'm trying to keep all those kind of straight. And this slide says, he's taking your leak and checking it twice, going to find out who's naughty and nice. And Santra introduces mandatory drug testing among his elves. Another fun thing we ran into was several crashes. And yes, I am one of those really strange people who hears about a crash, whether it's train or bus or truck, who gets excited and tries to figure out, okay, what happened? And a few of you may know that I'm into sleep apnea lately. So whenever I hear a crash, especially in the middle of the night, the first thing I try to look at is, what does the operator look like? And some of you may remember that there was a crash up in New York with New York Transit, and Mr. Rockefeller, saw a picture of Mr. Rockefeller. Yeah, he had sleep apnea. So I like looking at crashes. This one, though, wasn't due to sleep apnea. This was due to an individual who couldn't see the colors of the signal because his vision kept on deteriorating. And what did the examiner do? Well, had 3 pieces of yarn. What color's this? People who are color deficient often can learn tools looking at shading to identify a color, which is fine when it doesn't really matter and there's not a safety issue involved, because this gentleman just crashed because he couldn't see that it was a stop rather than a proceed with caution. So I got involved with the FRA, and we had one of the advisory groups where we looked at the literature, we looked at the science, we looked at other similar industries, primarily it was FAA at the time, and said, how do they test their operators for color vision? And came up, and I got involved with writing one of the first regulations on color vision, or the updated regulations on color vision for the FRA. So, hey, this is kind of fun. This is kind of legal regulatory. I'm really enjoying myself. But again, I needed to learn a little bit more to know what I was doing, and I graduated medical school. I can either give you the year, you're going to figure it out anyway, 1985. For those of you that graduated before 1984 who are not board certified, you are still eligible for the alternative pathway to board certification. I missed that by 18 months. So I thought it was important to get that credential. Well, did a practicum year at Jefferson, grandfathered in, or didn't grandfather in, took my boards. Okay, so now I'm doing occupational medicine, and now I have the reasonable credentials. And the next thing I know, I'm being nominated for the ACOEM Board of Directors, and kept on the board for about 12 years, been all through the officer path, did my president's sentence, and now I'm a past president, which means I get a really nice pin. A few other bennies, but not much. But I still had to have a real job. So what was my real job going to be? Well, Conrail left Philadelphia. So do I want a real job? Do I want to consult? Do I want something different? Well, just ended up doing consulting and working for lots of different companies. So I did some work with Amtrak. I did some work with Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. I'm the medical director of the Federal Reserve Bank in Philadelphia still. So worked for a pharmacy benefits manager in their pain management group when they were looking at drug testing pain management patients. And then lots of medical legal work. And then next thing I knew, I was recruited to be on the American Board of Preventive Medicine. So I've been a trustee on the ABPM for 8 years. And this year, I am vice chair of occupational medicine. So those of you that are taking the board exam this year, it's a great exam. It's fair. I can't tell you what's on it, but it's a good exam. And then more special projects. Working with the Federal Transit Administration on over-the-counter and prescription medications, a medication toolkit project, medical centers in the railroad industry. How many of you do railroad work? Anybody? Okay. Going to give you a case study right now. You have a locomotive engineer. He has a seizure. Gets a note from his doctor. Seizure, low risk of recurrence. You can come back to work 1 month after the seizure. You let him come back to work? Is there a regulation that says he can't come back to work? No. The only medical standards for the railroad operators, even those in safety-sensitive positions right now, vision, hearing, color vision, any of which can be waived by a designated supervisor of locomotive engineers in discussion with a physician. That's it. There are no medical standards. We've been working since 2005 in trying to get some type of reasonable medical standards for safety-sensitive railroad workers. Not there yet. Spent some work on the Railroad Retirement Board. We all think we know about Social Security. RRB is totally different. If you can get someone who says you're disabled, you get your benefits. It is very difficult to get people off RRB disability. If you're from New York, you may have read the news about a number of physicians and employees and other groups that had been charged and in some cases jailed for faking disability records. Long Island Railroad was one of the biggest culprits of that. So I was involved with that. And then most recently, which was kind of fun, working on a National Academy of Science project on fatigue and driver fatigue issues. So, you kind of get out there, the more you get involved, the more topics you begin to think you know something about, or people think you know something about, the more groups you get invited to be a part of. Hours of service, Schedule II medications, traumatic brain injuries, sleep apnea. So again, just kind of get involved and really develop that special area. I was just, how did you do it? Well, it just kind of fell into my lap in a way. I kind of volunteered, and that's maybe the message, good or bad. Volunteer, get involved. The more you volunteer, the more you get involved, the more you're going to develop your network, the more you develop your network, the more you're going to be asked to do more, the more you're going to learn, because I didn't know a whole lot about fatigue when I started out. And I still go into a trial deposition, and I always say, I am not a fatigue expert. I know about fatigue, But the important thing is I know enough about fatigue to be able to talk intelligently to those that know a lot more than me. So get involved and learn more. So what do I do now? Well, in addition to being on the faculty at Penn's residency program, I'm Chief Medical Review Officer and Medical Advisor Occupational Health for a third-party administrator, Medical Director of the Federal Reserve, Medical Director of Sunoco, Chief Medical Officer of Ocumedics, which is my consulting firm. I teach the ACOEM National Registry Training Program, and I do lots and lots of legal work and special projects. In other words, I stay really busy, but I love what I'm doing. And as I kept saying, as I've gotten more and more involved, I've made more friends, more colleagues, a bigger network, and a lot of things I don't know, more things I don't know than I do know, but I know who to call to ask that question. And that's what I urge all of you to do. So we talked about this engineer with a seizure, can he operate a train? And the answer, believe it or not, is yes, he can. Depending on the railroad, there are no federal medical standards that prohibit an individual who has seizures, who's a diabetic, from operating a locomotive engineer, from operating a locomotive. And this is the regulation. So not only is there no regulation, but for the few regulation, or the only regulation there is on vision, hearing, color vision, you can have that waived depending on where they're working. It's very different when you're dealing with trucks or bus because you can't write restrictions. In the railroad, you can write restrictions, limiting them to certain types of track or certain types of routes. Now, the Federal Transit Administration. Think about our intercity buses. Are there medical standards for those guys? The FTA is primarily a granting agency. They do have some regulations, but they primarily grant financial resources for these transit agencies to work. There are a number of different groups, a number of different states that have their own internal medical regulations, but not on a federal level. The FTA does have drug testing regulations, and one of the best sources for medication safety information is the FTA. They have a prescription over-the-counter toolkit, and they also have a quarterly newsletter on drug and alcohol update, which talks about all the different potentially impairing medications. So again, no, the FTA does not have regulations, nor do they issue regulations on medical standards. And final question, so we have our 3 CME questions out of this, is can a CNV operator drive if they're on OxyContin? How many say yes? How many say no? How many say it depends? It depends. The regulation is pretty vague on that. So it's understanding how do you evaluate, what resources can you use, and how can you argue to all those different stakeholders I mentioned earlier that I don't think this individual should be driving our truck while he's taking OxyContin. And what kind of literature, what kind of precedent, what kind of legal cases can I show them that they're going to be running afoul of if they put this person on the road, even though there's no regulation that says he can't. Now, what about methadone? Methadone is kind of an interesting animal. Can they drive if they're on methadone? Technically, no. Technically, no. Because that's part of the advisory criteria. However, they can apply for an exemption. Now, what about an implantable defibrillator? Can an examiner certify a driver with an implantable defibrillator? Yes and no. They complete the certification if the driver is otherwise medically qualified, and then refer the driver to apply for an exemption. So far, there has not been an exemption granted, but the examiner certifies that they are otherwise medically qualified. And I think I answered all these questions already. So what are my observations on occupational medicine in general? When I first started out, there were lots and lots of corporate positions. Then the pendulum started swinging where there were very, very few corporate positions, and most of the occupational medicine docs worked in a clinic, worked in private practice, were seeing patients, lots of workers' comp, lots of surveillance, lots of DOT exams. And now we're seeing that a lot more corporate positions are now becoming available. Most people in occupational medicine didn't start in OcMed. They all started in something else. How many of you have done something else first? Internal medicine, family practice. That's really typical. And what's really nice about that is we all bring our different perspectives. So if you started out in neurology, You have a different knowledge on traumatic brain injury and the prognosis and the risk in the workplace and how that may affect safety-sensitive jobs than somebody who doesn't have that neurology background. If you're a surgeon, and I apologize if you're a surgeon, but that's besides the point, you understand recovery from surgery. You understand some of the limitations that the person may have in getting back. You understand the complications. So I really see our field as being very rich, not just because of how different we practice, but how different we got here, how much different information we came with before we got into that. And, bottom line, I have to keep promoting ACOM. If this is your first ACOM meeting, I hope it's not your last. If it's your 10th ACOM meeting, thank you and keep on coming. This is your resource. This is the beginning of your network. This is how you learn how to get your own path through occupational medicine. Learn what you want to do. Learn how to get there, and then like most of us, you get bored and you move on. So, any questions? Yes.
So the previous speaker, Dr. Daniel, he talked about
Dr. Danny, yes.
the guidance for firefighters and police officers, and he said to please feel free to extrapolate that guidance to all other positions in industry, safety sensitive. So you're saying don't do it or you get sued.
Yeah. Okay. What I'm going to say, and Chris, can you eject my flash drive because I can't find the right button to eject it. There's a fine line. I don't want to walk away. That's my watcher. There's a fine line between using those regulations, those guidelines, and using them as a starting point as guidance. When you're looking at individuals in safety-sensitive positions where there are no specific regulations, you benchmark. You benchmark other people in the same industry and say, what are you doing for your company? You benchmark other similar jobs. So railroad engineers and truck drivers and pilots and other safety-sensitive employees aren't all that different. If you're going to be impaired, you're going to be impaired, you're going to be impaired. So you can't use that as the absolute, I am doing this. However, it is an appropriate, reasonable starting point when there's nothing else out there. So again, that's where a lot of companies have gotten themselves into trouble. They will hold drivers, and UPS, if anybody works for UPS, has gotten a lot of lawsuits, and they hold that their drivers who operate vehicles less than 10,000 pounds to Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. They're not required to meet them. However, it's reasonable to say, okay, this is our starting point, but we have a lot more flexibility. So does that help? It's all in the semantics. It's all how you word it. It's all the spin. Other questions? Okay, well then I was the only thing standing between you and break, so I will let you decide how long break's going to be.
Folks, it's 10:30. Let's take a 15-minute break. We'll be back here at 10:45. There should be some coffee out there. Our next speaker is going to be Dr. Doug Martin, and tell you his story.
Thanks, Chris, and welcome everybody this morning. I have a few things I like to do at the beginning when I do presentations, and that I kind of like to know my audience. So forgive me. I know Mark asked some general questions earlier today, but do we have medical students here? How about residents? Okay, and of the residents that are here, are you occupational medicine or are you primary care residency? Occupational? Okay. And do we have any family doctors here? And of the family doctors who are here, have you done OCMED or just coming to see what possibilities exist or kind of somewhere in between?
I'm working for the VA hospital as an operating provider.
Okay, so you're in the VA system.
Yes.
Wonderful. I spent a little time in that system too, so welcome. And do we have occupational medicine doctors here? None of those? How about other disciplines? ER, a lot of ER doctors? No? Yeah? Quite a few? Surgeons? General surgery? Okay, so we got a mishmash everybody. This is great. Okay, so my kind of task that I'm asked to go over with you in this little presentation here are two main objectives. Number one, to kind of tell you my story about how a primary care doctor got into occupational medicine, and even more importantly is to set the table for Bob Bourgeois, who's the speaker after me, who you'll get a kick out of. He speaks a foreign language called Cajun. And he sounds a lot different than I do, coming from the Midwest. So one of the things that I always like to try to explain to people, and I think sometimes occupational medicine doctors don't like to admit this, but the majority of workers' compensation care in the United States is taken care of by who? It's primary care. You're exactly right. So that by and of itself, I think, defines part of sort of the challenge that we have within the world of occupational medicine is that we have, at the very nature, defined for us a supply and demand economics problem. Okay? And how are we going to take care of the worker? How are we going to satisfy the other needs in occupational medicine that are important? And the occupational medicine residencies graduate somewhere between 60 and 80 a year. That's not enough. Okay? So what we have to do is that we have to be honest with ourselves and we have to rate other disciplines. Okay? That happens. All right? And there isn't anything wrong with that. Okay? If you actually talk to physicians across the country, you'll find that a lot of them practice in arenas or areas that they weren't originally thinking about doing. Many, go into one residency and get board certification and then they decide to do something different. There's nothing wrong with that. People change throughout the course of their careers, and that's certainly okay. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm a reformed family doctor. I went to medical school at the University of Nebraska. Go Big Red. Okay. And I'm a card-carrying member of Husker Nation. I have season tickets. So anybody want to talk to me about going to the Oregon game this fall, come talk to me. It'll be a cool game. But basically, I thought that I was going to go practice in small-town USA. I grew up in a town of 1,000 people. Okay. However, in that 1,000-person town, we had a huge cement company that employed about 3/4 of the town. All right? And I guess if you want to think about it, and as I think about this, that was probably my first thought process about getting into occupational medicine. Because you saw that industry, and you saw everybody in the town that was basically tied to it in one way, shape, or another. So I went to medical school, and I decided to do a family medicine residency. And I went to the Quad Cities to do that, Davenport, Iowa. But when I was in the residency program in Davenport, I got even more exposure to workers' compensation and occupational medicine things because Davenport's a great industrial complex, but yet kind of a little bit of a small-town community. You got John Deere there. You got a big Alcoa aluminum factory. There's a huge military installation there. So you got a lot of different things going on there. And I took those opportunities to kind of do elective training in those disciplines where I thought, this might be kind of cool. So I spent a lot of time with the orthopedic doctors to learn how to take care of hand injuries. I spent a lot of time with the occupational medicine doctors affiliated with the hospital programs to kind of learn about some of the things that Natalie just talked about, the regulation, the guidance, those kinds of things that were in the world of how do you take care of people, how do you figure out if they're fitness for duty, are they qualified for a job, and those kinds of things. When I got down with my residency, I sort of kind of had this idea that maybe I would try to do a mixed practice. I thought, well, you know, I still kind of want to do family medicine because I like to do a lot of family medicine things. I like to deliver kids and take care of kids, and I like to actually go to the nursing home. I know that sounds kind of strange, but I kind of enjoy geriatrics. So I didn't want to give that up, but I also recognized that I liked occupational medicine. The one thing that I really liked about OcMed was musculoskeletal medicine. Okay? Many docs that go through a family medicine track that like musculoskeletal things oftentimes will do what's called a sports medicine fellowship. If you're in the FP world, you probably know that. And I thought about that, but what I realized is that the sports medicine track through the Family Medicine Board certification process and what they call a CAQ really kind of teaches you how to do, like team doctor kind of stuff. And that's great, okay, but I wanted to do a little bit more with that. So long story short, looked at where I was going to go after I graduated from residency, and I landed in Sioux City, Iowa. This was 22 years ago. I'm still there. Okay? Now, some of you probably don't even know where Sioux City, Iowa is. Let me give you a little geography lesson. That's where Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota all kind of come together. All right? Sioux City is a big location for agricultural industry. Okay? If you don't know anything about Sioux City, think meat packing. All right? I am either lucky or cursed to take care of one of the largest meatpacking facilities in North America. 6,000 workers in Dakota City, Nebraska. Okay? Fantastic facility. All right? So, come to Sioux City, 1994, sign on with a hospital system, and they say, Dr. Martin, we would really like to have you do both. We need family doctors. We need occupational medicine doctors. So I said, okay, fine. So I started my practice and kind of split time, 50-50, right? 2.5 days a week I was in the family medicine clinic, 2.5 days a week I was in the OcMed clinic. That lasted for about 6 months. And then it became a 100-100 split practice. And it's like, oh boy, now what do I do? So, you ramp up your family medicine patients. You're getting busier and busier in occupational medicine. It's like, okay, geez, now what do I do? And I have to tell you, at that particular time, my wife and I decided to start a family. And that was probably the tipping point for why I decided to do occupational medicine full-time after that point in time. Why? One of the great things about OcMed is, for all intents and purposes, it's a pretty much 8 to 5 job. You pretty much got your weekends. You don't get calls at 2 o'clock in the morning to go in and do spinal taps on 6-month-old kids that are febrile. You don't get calls in the middle of the night from crazy patients most of the time. So that was kind of an easy decision for me. So I got more and more involved in occupational medicine. And for most of what I did initially for the first couple of years was pretty much nuts and bolts clinical type injury care stuff. All right? Like I said, I like musculoskeletal stuff, so, I took care, because of the meatpacking industry, upper extremity things are really prominent, right? So trigger fingers and tennis elbow and carpal tunnel and rotator cuff problems and all these kinds of things. And I was really good at least I think I was good, at doing the conservative type things and getting people successfully back to work, which is really kind of the cool part about this, right? So I had some extra training in how to do injections, which really helped. I kind of found in Sioux City that was really kind of strange to me that the majority of the family doctors really didn't like to do injections. So when I showed up to the community and was doing all this, they kind of looked at me like, well, where did you learn how to do that? Well, that was all my experience in the residency program. So I kind of got good at that and kind of started to develop a reputation. And then it's interesting, because the companies that we were working for started to ask me to do more things. And one of those things they said, well, have you ever thought about doing impairment ratings? And I said, what's an impairment rate? And they explained to me what that was all about. So I went and got some training, joined some organizations, got some certifications, and the next thing I know, I'm doing a bunch of impairment ratings. Got pretty good at that. Next thing I get is calls from attorneys and insurance companies, not just in Sioux City now, but across the country. Have you ever thought about doing independent medical exams? I said, what's an IME? So they explained to me what that's about. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting. I think maybe I'd like to dip my toe in that water and see what that's all about. So I did some independent medical examinations and wrote some reports and got some pretty good positive feedback. And now I have to turn that work down a lot of times because it's such a needed area. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that, there's lots of different things in occupational medicine that you can do. And there's a lot of different opportunities out there for folks in OcMed. It's kind of like a menu, I like to kind of tell people, and you can make that menu as big or as small as you want, all right? If you're like me and you like musculoskeletal topics, the clinical aspect of OcMed and injury care is really kind of a fun thing, okay? If you're not really great in that, but you like the regulatory stuff like Natalie does, and you like to do clearance exams and figure out fitness for duty and all those kinds of things, that's a cool thing. You can do that. If you're a good writer, I tell you what, a lot of times physicians underestimate what their authorship skills are. That's something that I've kind of found out. If you're a good writer, I would suggest to you that getting into independent medical examinations is probably not a bad thing. Because as you write a report in the medical legal world, this becomes incredibly important, okay? Communication skills, how to communicate to the non-physician reader, medical problems and impacts, and all of those things kind of fall together. So the thing about this is that my message to you is that if you are thinking about occupational medicine, don't think for a minute that you have to have some fancy OcMed background, go to the best medical school, go to the best residency, or what have you. Those things are nice, don't get me wrong. But you do have a role in this process if you come from some other discipline. I come from a family medicine background. There's many colleagues of mine that do occupational medicine that have surgical backgrounds, that have ER backgrounds. It's something also that I find that my orthopedic colleagues like to get into if they don't want to spend all their time in the operating room anymore. Okay? So all of those things can be very, very helpful. The other thing about a primary care background that I think is extremely important in occupational medicine is that most primary care doctors are very good listeners. Why do I say that that's important in occupational medicine? Because understanding the worker's story is very important. Whether you're talking about an injury, whether you're talking about it in the context of maybe a fitness for duty determination, trying to figure out from them what they do, whether it's in the context of an independent medical examination where you're trying to assimilate more information to try to figure out exactly what's going on, those listening skills are very, very important. The other thing is I will tell you that primary care folks are really a good fit for occupational medicine and workers' compensation care in particular. Have very good history and physical examination skills. Now, I don't have to tell you that. When you go through a primary care residency, you learn how to examine everybody, right? Infants all the way up to folks that are 100 years old. A good H&P is critical in the work that we do as occupational medicine doctors. And I can't underscore that enough. So if you have that basic background and that basic understanding, that's going to get you a long way. So with all this, the other thing that I want to tell you is that if you're looking at this from the standpoint of lifestyle, and you're looking at it from the standpoint of income, which are kind of two things that a lot of people like to, make sure that are okay, I can tell you, coming from a family medicine background, that the world of medicine right now is changing, right? We have a lot of regulatory things going on. We got the Affordable Care Act. Whether you think that's good or bad, it's there, Okay? And what that has done is that has put a lot of increased burden on how people practice medicine in the United States. In the family medicine world, more regulatory burden. Making sure that you're meeting all those guidelines with respect to patient-centered medical home and joining an accountable care organization, making sure that you're on, participating in the pay-for-performance activities, population health strategies, all these kinds of things are important for family doctors, and those things are a bit of a regulatory burden. I'm not suggesting that occupational medicine is free from that, but I can tell you, when you talk about the differences between working in the family medicine world and the OCMED world is much more streamlined. There's no question about it. The other thing that I'll tell you is about payment. In this country, primary care really has to fight for payment and reimbursement. And the thing that really bothers me about the discourse with respect to things like Medicare and all these other kinds of things is that doctors always talk about reimbursement. I hate that word. Do you reimburse your plumber when he comes and works on your house? Do you reimburse your mechanic when you take your car in? No, you pay your plumber. You pay your auto mechanic. I think that narrative has to switch. We should be paid for what we do. We're professionals. We're providing a service. Okay? Put that issue aside. In our particular location, in our clinic system in occupational medicine, we are currently getting paid 91% of what we are billing. There is no family medicine clinic in the United States that can come close to that. Okay? The majority of family medicine in the United States usually is paid at about a 70 percentile to billing level because of the discounting, the contracts, the acceptance of the Medicare rates, and these sorts of things. So my message that I want to give you with respect to that is that if you're looking at a discipline that actually pays you for what you do, occupational medicine is kind of the place to be. Bob here yet?
Bob is here.
Bob is here. All right. My job now is to get out of the way for my Cajun colleague.
You want to take a couple of questions?
I sure can take a couple of questions, and I'll stay around a little bit too. So thanks for your attention. And if you have any questions, make sure you let me know.
Okay, testing. Can everybody understand me? Good. Okay. I'm Bob Bourgeois from Morgan City, Louisiana. This is how I talk. What we're going to talk about today is some of the things we do in clinical practice because, like we said, in occupational medicine, all of us do a lot of different things. If you ask us what we do, you'll get about 2,000 different answers because we all do a little bit different in our practice, whether it's clinical, research, governmental, military, the whole thing. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do down in South Louisiana besides wait for hurricanes. Oop. Which one?
Try that one there.
That one? There you go. Have nothing to disclose. My wife gets all my money. Objectives. We'll talk about different things that you can do to add occupational medicine to your practice if you're already doing primary care and you want to know things that you can do. And looking at evaluating opportunities in your area, different types of exams that we can do. Requirements for some special exams, because there are some things you need to have training, certification, different things for, and we'll talk about that. Different testing and ancillary services. Something different for us where we are in Louisiana. It's kind of neat because we've got a lot of really good folks down there, really good food, really good football most of the time. And they actually treat you like royalty most of the time down there, so it's kind of cool. So anyway, that was my real beard. That's not my real hair. I did that this year for Mardi Gras. My 1970s hair was actually longer and thicker than that, but my beard's getting a little bit more gray. Types of exams. Commercial drivers to do federal motor carriers exams. Now you have to be certified, so that's a day training, and then you take a test. You do have to report those online now. Federal transit, interstate, school bus drivers, all those kinds of things are different physicals you can look at for your area. Railroad, and you don't have to be certified to do those now. Coast Guard, I have a Homeland Security appointment to the Coast Guard to help them write merchant mariner medical guidelines and exams. And about a month ago, they just tasked me with a project to look at how to do training if they go to a designated medical examiner pilot program. So they may do that eventually. FAA, there are about 2,000 of us, maybe 2,000 plus in the country that do pilot exams, and that you have to go to training and keep up a certification and all too. And those are also reported online. And I'm actually squeezing an hour into this thing, so I'm going to talk a little fast, but we'll have questions at the end, or if you need something in the middle. I do talk a little bit faster than I'm supposed to. But if you need me to slow down, let me know. For merchant mariner exams, these are some of the links, and I actually put them online on the download, so you can look at that. You can click on them, and those are current links. The color vision testing in there, if you look at the NAVIC, which is the medical guidelines for mariners, it'll be on there. The color vision testing, they actually list that on the Coast Guard 719K, which is the physical form that you have to use. And when they talk about the different types, the most common things we see are people using Ishihara plates, but you can also use the Titmus or the Optec vision screeners with those plates. Other than that, if somebody has a colored vision deficiency, the deck officers, the masters and mates, have to be able to see colored lights. So that's the Farnsworth Lantern or the Optec 900, which are colored lights, which is confused always with the Farnsworth D15, the colored caps that are in a chromatic scale. So we see folks all the time. Good, I have the time, thanks. We see folks all the time that say we did the Farnsworth Lantern, but they just did the colored caps, and that's not acceptable for deck officers. The colored lights are not acceptable for engineers because they have to see blue in addition to red, green, and white and yellow. But for blue, you'd have to either do the Ishihara plates or the D15. Crane operator physicals. A lot of companies ask for crane operator physicals, and they say, do a CDL physical on them. Well, technically, you're forcing somebody to get a federal exam, for something that doesn't require it. It's like having a secretary for a boat company get a Coast Guard DOT drug screen. It's really meant for certain folks. So on crane operator physicals, while we do similar exams to the commercial drivers, we don't give that paperwork to them on the CDL form. We actually have a separate form, and it says they're cleared to operate a crane. And on those, you need to do vision, including acuity, color, field of vision, and depth perception. But if you don't have one of these vision screeners that does far depth, and you're using the 3D glasses so they can pinch the reindeer on the nose or pinch the fly, that's near depth. Crane operators really don't operate this far away from their eyes. So a lot of times they'll go to Walmart, Vision Plaza, whatever, and the optometrist says, oh, their depth is normal. I said it's normal with his cheaters on, but it's not normal with his far vision. So you need to check depth for far. Well, none of them ever know how to do that. So in your machine, if you have the slides that do that, that's the benefit. There are some things for the crane operators between hearing, blood pressure, the urine dipstick, all those are important to check. There are some crane operator standards. You can use some of those. And again, don't use the Federal Motor Carrier CDL form. Just do your own physical and say that they're medically cleared to operate a crane. Yes, ma'am.
The ANSI standard and the reaction timing testing, is that commonly done? What do you use to do that?
Most folks aren't doing that. Yeah. And I mean, and what's funny is, most companies don't even have a clue what they're supposed to do with them. They think, well, if we send him to crane training, and the crane training place said, get a CDL physical on them. So you have to ask them sometime, what are they doing and what standard they're under. And when you ask them that, they think you're crazy because a lot of folks don't know. So various exams. If you're doing starting to do occupational physicals in your office, you really should be able to do visions and more than just the eye chart. So it's good if you get one of the screeners, and Titmus and Optech are the two most popular ones. If you're doing FAA physicals, make sure and look at the different pieces of equipment that conform with the FAA requirements, because at one time, either Titmus or Optech, one of them would be out of favor with them and not approved. And this last round of upgrades on some of these with LED lights, it changed the color perception. So 50% of folks that had normal color vision before all of a sudden failed on one of the newer machines. So the FAA said you can't use that one. So it's good to know what you can use before you buy it, because otherwise they're just expensive paperweights. Hearing testing, get a good booth, get a good machine, get your machine calibrated annually. For your folks that are doing hearing, there's a KOC certification, which makes it a whole lot easier for you to make sure things are being done right, and that's good. The blood pressure testing, whether you're doing it for wellness screenings or exposures, blood testing for screenings or exposures, and knowing what to order for what. Urine screening for either drugs of abuse testing or exposures. Pulmonary function testing. American Thoracic Society and the NIOSH folks all have some programs where you can get your staff certified to do those. And anybody doing pulmonary function testing, that particular technician should have that certification. Because if you go to court and they're not doing it right, and they're not doing 3 tests within 5% variability and all the other things that you're supposed to do, you don't look as much like you know what you were doing. Fit testing, whether you're doing quantitative fit testing or qualitative fit testing. Some of it is subjective. Can they taste the Bitrex, the most bitter substance we can find? If they have a quantitative fit testing, when they're doing the measurement of the difference between ambient air and the air inside the mask, it does require a little bit of training to get used to do it right. And if you look at the OSHA respirator CFR, you can look up fit testing in one of the appendices and figure out that your folks are going to do it right. Graded exercise testing. We don't do it in our office because we have board-certified cardiologists within a block of us all around. And I was previously boarded in emergency medicine too. And although I've taken care of hundreds and hundreds of MIs, I don't think I've ever precipitated one. So I decided to forego doing those in my office. Vision, the different ways to test them. Again, Optech and Titmus have good vision screeners. Some exams, different specific tests, like we said, for crane operators for depth. So visual acuity, near, far, and intermediate. When we do pilots for the FAA, you have to do intermediate vision because they're looking at the console and looking at instruments, and it's not at 14 inches like most folks are doing for near. Same thing, we do the same thing with some of the crane operators. When I worked for Martin Marietta at Lockheed Martin, the defense contractor, we had folks doing work on benchtop work, looking up at a VDT, because everything was on the screen, so you had no paper, and they're looking up at diagrams, and if they have the cheaters built into their prescription glasses, they're all looking like this to try and read the screen. So we went to trifocals, and the top correction, we actually measured from the pupil to the screen and gave them intermediate on those top ones, and so then all of our strained necks went away. But it was kind of comical to walk in there and just see everybody working like that. Intermediate, a lot of them will look at about 32 inches or so. But there's actually a set of lenses you slip in on these screeners that changes you from near and far to make it intermediate. Again, with color vision, the most common things to use would be the Ishihara plates, a lantern test, which could either be the Farnsworth lantern, which is no longer made anymore, but you can find them sometime on eBay. Or Optech has something called the Optech 900, which is the same kind of thing. And then the D15 are the colored caps. We get calls all the time because folks say, what color vision tests do y'all do? So we have 7 different ways of testing color vision, and we rotate them every day. at random because they're trying to figure out how to memorize the test and come in. In the UK, they found out that some of the pilots weren't memorizing the Ishihara plates, but they were memorizing the dot pattern over the certain numbers. So now they have some that are generated by computer. So even the dot patterns around it are different. But I'm halfway dyslexic, so I don't think I get dot patterns. The field of vision, again, that's important for the pilots, so we do those. We even have to do some of the phorias, how well your eyes are lining up. So we do those, and that's on those machines. And then depth, again, near versus far. If you have folks that are doing soldering work, their near vision is important. If you have guys that operate in cranes, far is important. Retinal exams. DOT now wants you to have dilated retinal exams on diabetics to look for diabetic retinopathy. And then folks doing laser work, a lot of times they'll want to look at that to make sure you didn't have any damage. Somebody I used to do some consulting for before when I was in Florida had this guy lining up a laser beam for a laser show. And he's leaning forward trying to see where the beam's going, and it hit his glasses and came right back into his eye. And that was impressive. Hearing. Generally, you'd want to have a good audio booth or a really, really quiet room. What we did when we built the building is I put 6-inch studs in the wall instead of 4-inch studs, spaces, so that none of the studs touch between the walls, and we wove insulation through it. So the room's actually really, really quiet. And then we have the big boy booth, because in Louisiana we have big boys that work offshore. So it's really quiet. And so quiet that the ones with sleep apnea sleep in there sometimes. So the booth and the audiometer should both be calibrated. If you get your technicians trained with KAOC, a lot of times, they can keep you out of trouble because they do things right. You don't get folks coming back and saying what happened here. And different exams require periodic audios also. So, you can get a lot of work done doing those. Lab testing. Depends on what kind of stuff you're doing, but OSHA surveillance, testing for lead, cadmium, arsenic, beryllium, all sorts of things. But then some of them require labs, some don't. Just make sure you know what you're ordering, because if you just tell someone in your office, hey, figure out what you need to draw and have that sent out, it's not really going to be that effective. Annual exams. Hemoglobin A1Cs for the drivers, for boat captains, for pilots, all kind of folks. TB screens, and if you're doing wellness programs or TB programs for hospitals, you do those. And whether that's the blood testing now or PPDs, and for us, we have folks coming in from all over the country trying to go overseas, go offshore, whatever. If we do a PPD on somebody and tell them to come back in 72 hours, have it read, they got to put the guy up in a hotel for 72 hours. So the cost of the blood testing is now offset by 3 days in a hotel and 3 days of pay. So we end up doing a whole lot more of those. Executive exams. Doing executive exams, that's oftentimes a really good way to stay in good touch with the companies, because you're doing their managers, vice presidents, directors, whatever. And it's a good benefit to them too. And if you keep their folks healthy, they don't have to worry as much about guys dropping dead on them and replacing them, which is something that they might not worry about until it happens, but they're grateful when you catch something. Post-exposure, bloodborne pathogens, that sort of thing. So, we do a lot of that for the hospitals, different ambulance services, the corrections offices at the jail, all those folks. Urine drug testing. Tons of reasons. There are DOT testing, everybody knows most of the rules on that. And then the non-DOT work, whether it's pre-employment, post-accident, reasonable suspicion, randoms, follow-up, return to duty. We do the student athletes. We also do some of the police jurisdictions. And we do some folks for synthetic marijuana and bath salts. We do steroid testing for some of the folks. A lot of different things like that. To be a medical review officer, you go to the training, take the course. You have to renew periodically. And if you're doing any of the federal testing, you have to have that. And then you can also have the MRO assistant certified. So, we have somebody that's been through the program with the MROCC stuff with ACOEM, and that worked out well. And she's a big help to us because she can actually explain some things to companies that would otherwise I'd have to get on the phone every time they call. So that's good. And then certification for your staff as far as collective training and bat training if you're doing breath alcohols. The pulmonary function studies. A lot of exams require you to have them. Technicians should have been trained in a NIOSH course, which is American Thoracic Society does all that stuff with them. And then this link gives you sponsors for folks that do the courses, and they're really, really good. And then when companies come in and say, we just had this guy. Is that me?
It's probably Daddy's fault. It's me.
Okay. So, maybe it says.
What do you think's going on? Did you use the mic?
Good now. That may have been my mother-in-law. It's being recorded again, and God, dog it. That's why I never let her listen to these things. So ATS also gives recommendations on spirometers and that sort of thing. So again, look at all that before you buy one, and you can buy some that are really, really cheap. And
Bob,
switch.
You're allowed to talk, or do you want to allow me to say? Podium mic. Podium, sure.
Where's that strap to you?
That may be remote.
Might be that here. Hold on.
Radioactive.
There you go, better? Okay. This will be the first time anybody's seen me sit still and talk. So anyway, I will back up one. Okay. And so anyway, look up what kind you want to get before you buy them, and then if you have folks that are certified technicians, then they'll know to calibrate your spirometers regularly and all that good stuff, and they'll do a good job for you. The fit testing, I'll put the links on here and the protocols, and so that's that appendix you can look for. And in qualitative testing, again, it's subjective. You're asking somebody, can they taste it, can they smell it, can whatever. Those are nice. You can only do them on half-face respirators, but on full face, or if you want really good fit testing, you do quantitative fit testing where you're measuring the difference between ambient air outside and air inside the mask, and that gives you a computer-generated fit factor, which is much better. Surveillance exams, whether it's OSHA hearing conservation with the annual audiograms in comparison to the baseline, respirator questionnaires, and fit testing. The OSHA website has all the different exams, requirements, and testing for a bunch of different things that you can do surveillance on based on the companies around you. And a lot of them don't even know what they're working with, or don't know that some of these things are there. So whenever you pick up a new company or you do something with them, I always talk to them and find out what they're doing if I don't already know, and try and help them make sure they're doing things right. So these are just a handful of the substances that they have exams for, as they're calling them, toxic substances for surveillance. And then fitness for duty evaluations. So these are basically prior to job placement, a new hire, change in job requirements, folks going overseas. Right now in the oil field, there are a lot of folks that used to work just in the Gulf of Mexico. Now they're having to fly to all these different places, go change jobs. And some of them have medical issues that either are not controlled or should not be in remote locations. So we look at that, look at folks doing hazardous duty work. If you're doing firefighting, confined space entry, that sort of thing for your company, but you had no physical in the last 30 years and that sort of thing. Our record BMI, because we have big boys in Louisiana, we have 500-pound scales at the office because we weigh some big boys. We had a fellow a while back, we put both scales together and weighed him like you do a truck. He was 5'11", 571 pounds. So his BMI was 78.8. He's almost 100 pounds a foot. Very, very interesting fellow. So toward the end of the physical, I asked him to put his hands up over his head and go down and touch his toes. And he went down, palms flat on the floor, pushed off and came back up. Man, at first I'm thinking, man, this guy is flexible as can be. But then, if you think back, if you had high school physics and college physics, it was momentum. And then the company says, he came in for the interview, so we sent him for the physical, but we're not sure where we can use him. What do you think we can have him do? I said, he could be a buoy. So anyway, return to work after, whether it's work-related injuries or non-occupational injuries. A lot of companies want to make sure folks are now fit for duty. We've had things where a guy had a stent placed on Friday, and one of the mid-levels at the cardiologist's office said, what do you do? He said, well, I'm a supervisor for an oil company. I said, oh, well, you can go back to work Monday. But he didn't tell him he's 256 miles offshore and 5-hour flight in and out to get him if there's a problem. Well, the guy got out there on Monday with his 50-pound duffel bag on his shoulder, climbing down the stairs from the heliport, started having chest pain, and they just put him right back on the helicopter and brought him in. So it's nice to know what people do. And you'll find out a lot of folks never ask their patients what they do or where they work. And for us, it's really important. I mean, we'll have guys that, we had one fella, I don't know a night that passes that you're not seeing commercials for some of these different medicines for plaque psoriasis and all this other stuff, and it said it might cause immunosuppression. Well, this one guy was on one of the ones that advertises a lot, and something else, and his rheumatologist was fairly young, and she thought that immunosuppression was theoretical. So she put him on that. He came in because he was flying overseas the next day. He said his back was hurting, and he had a white count of 21,000, and his back was sore. And she said, well, you probably have another kidney stone. Why don't you go to the ER and let them check you? So they x-rayed him, or did a CT, and said, well, you don't have a kidney stone, but you have a left lower lobe pneumonia. So we'll put you, or infiltrate. So we'll put you on some antibiotics. So they didn't ask him much about his medicines. And since one of them was an injectable, you didn't tell him he was taking a pill. So he gets his antibiotics, flies to a third world country, offshore on a huge, 1,000-foot drill ship, runs out of his antibiotics a few days later, and they have to fly him in, put him in that hospital on 3 different antibiotics for a week. He kept getting worse. They sent him to a tertiary center where he stayed 15 days. But the first day he got there, they put a chest tube in to drain the pus out of his lungs and put him on 4 IV antibiotics. He was in the hospital 15 days there, so a total of 22 days. They made him take oral antibiotics for 10 more days when he got out, flew him home. His FVC on his spirometry now, this guy's 53 years old, never been in hospital in his life, never been sick. His FVC now is 53% of normal. He's never recovered. It's been a year and a half. He's still not really getting any better. And his doctor kept thinking it was, theoretical that you could get immunosuppression. So it's important to know where you folks are and what they do. And then job modifications. If somebody has an injury, illness, whether it's a permanent issue or temporary, whether or not they need job modifications. So we're the best folks to tell people with what they can and can't do. And it's not our job to give them a job. It's not our job to fire them. It's not our job to say, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's our job to give them a risk assessment and let them do what they need to do to make it right. So I don't take it personally if somebody says we can't use this guy or we can, because when I was in corporate medicine, I used to argue that a lot, and because I actually had some input there. But now I give them my opinion and let the company do what they need to do to because if they hire somebody that I think they've probably taken a big risk on, but they have to hire him for some political reason or whatever, business reason, that's okay. So I don't get mad at them for doing that. Fitness for duty evaluations, location issues, remote duty. If you don't have access to medical care, it's an issue. And whether it's some folks with really, really bad teeth, have a dental abscess, you're 3 days from medical care, you can get pretty sick and get infected and that sort of thing. Same thing with heart issues, some of the pulmonary issues, diabetes, all that sort of thing. Job requirements. It's good to have a good job description in the physical, mental, and emergency functions. If a guy is a clerk on a vessel offshore and does mostly paperwork, but his emergency functions include opening, closing watertight hatches, weighing up to 56 pounds, launching lifeboats, climbing ladders, firefighting, hauling a 2-inch fire hose. So if you don't know what they do, you say, well, he just does desk work. That's not always true in all those conditions. And then the most common things we see are cardiac issues, diabetes, pulmonary, sleep apnea. Because again, we have a lot of folks with a BMI of huge. So, and then neurological issues. And there are a lot of folks now taking all these different medicines that can be safety sensitive. So sometimes the issue is a medicine, sometimes it's a condition. We had a fellow that denied any medicines on his Coast Guard physical, which is now a federal criminal charge for lying. He denied it on our physical form, denied it on the company's paperwork. Went offshore for 2 weeks. His relief was having to do something else, so he stayed out an extra week. Well, about 4 days into it, I get a phone call at 10 o'clock on a Monday and said, we have a problem. I said, well, is it something I did? He said, no, this guy was good until this afternoon. He's been getting a little strange the last few days. He was good the first 2 weeks, but today he came into the galley and just stared at everybody for a minute, and he walked out. He said he came back about 5 minutes later, growling and grunting at everybody, buck naked. He said he won't answer questions, he won't talk to anybody. And he said the captain went to his room and he found an empty medicine bottle on a counter of ABILIFY. Okay. So now this guy had a problem. He was psychotic now. On the medicine, there was some issues with him with some other stuff. But the question is, he's way offshore. They called for a medical evacuation on an aeromedical helicopter. I said, no. I said, who wants somebody like that on your helicopter? He said, well, we're calling for a fast boat. They're going to try and get him in on. They don't want him in the boat. They don't want him even on the back deck. So I said, what are we going to do? I said, how big a boy is he? I said, well, he's 6'4", 240, soaking wet with sweat and naked. I said, y'all might as well just come in because it's not going to be good. So they had to actually disconnect from the job, steam all the way in. And, of course, as soon as they get to the dock, the ambulance wants to let them know they're there. So they flip the lights on. Yes. So anyway, so medicine is an issue, and you need to know what they're taking and why. Fitness for duty considerations. PPE. If somebody has a real bad problem with asthma and they're wearing respirators that increase the work of breathing, sometimes you have to figure out which ones they can and can't use. Additional protective clothing, whether it's fire-retardant clothing, fall protection, flotation, survival suits, all that sort of thing. Extremes of temperature and humidity. We call that Louisiana. if you look at the heat stress scales, I helped write the stuff for the Deepwater Horizon response. So for 49,000 folks on the beach, we wrote all the heat stress program for them. But if you look at the heat stress tables, in Louisiana, you can't work outside during the day by table from like May to about October, and you can't work outside at night June, July, August, because we're just too hot and too humid. But we all got used to it, and we had folks from all over the country coming to work down there, so we had to be a little conservative. So you look at all these things when you're looking at some of the folks working in heights, working over water. Some folks are scared of heights, and you're going to pick them up in a basket off the back deck of a boat and bring them up onto an oil rig or vice versa. And so it's nice to know that they're not going to freak out. Claustrophobic workspaces. Usually in a shipyard doing repair work, the smallest guy gets in the smallest holes. So if they're claustrophobic and they wig out in there, somebody's got to go get them. Some folks have troubles with long hours. Some of the diabetics on insulin. Their sugars start bouncing up and down a little bit if you have them working 12s and 18s and that sort of thing, which sometimes happens. Rotating shift work, if they're working days and then trying to work forward on their circadian cycle, which they tried to do that to us in the ER one time, and that drove us all nuts. So if anybody ever suggests that to you, it didn't really work well for us. And then on fitness for duty stuff, on the same drill ship, we'll have maritime crew, and those guys come under Coast Guard, the deck officers, the engine room, the seamen, the drilling crew, the driller, roustabout, tool pushers, offshore installation manager, and the administrative folks, the company reps, the safety reps, the medics. So all these different folks doing all these different jobs, some of them under different requirements for fitness. So there is a basic level of fitness for anybody working on vessels, basic level of fitness for anybody driving a truck. So there's always a basic, the lowest level that everybody has to meet, and it goes up on there depending on what else they do. So it goes up with remote location, limited medical care. Offshore, most of the time you have either a first aid person, a paramedic. Some of the foreign countries have doctors and nurses on their vessels, but they're not allowed to practice in U.S. waters. So sometimes you have to help them with what they need. So and there's not an ER offshore, so everything's being flown in. You have to be able to perform emergency procedures. You got to be able to save yourself and others. So if a guy breaks his ankle and he's on crutches, you say you can go back to work offshore, because sometimes folks will do that. Well, a guy on crutches can't really climb stairs in an emergency, certainly can't climb a ladder, can't drag somebody else up, so he becomes a liability to himself and others too. And then the thing about being offshore is you're never off duty, because everybody out there is there 24/7. So if there's an emergency and you just took your Ambien and your Loratab and your Xanax because your doctor said it was okay, you may not wake up with a fire. For the Deepwater Horizon, one of the things when we presented papers on that was that happened before the guys who were going to take that medicine took it and were too groggy, drowsy, whatever, to get up and function. Because if there's an explosion, everything's listing. The desk that was over here slid, and now it's covering the doorway. The lights are out. You're trying to figure out how to get out. That's not a good time to be foggy. So we try really hard to make sure folks aren't doing that. So this is the back deck of an anchor boat, and this is one of the ones that works out in Alaska. You're not really that far off the water, so you can get water waist deep coming over the stern sometime with waves. We have inland critters around the house that make things interesting. The guys are out there doing seismic work in an airboat, and they'll drop people off in chest waders, putting some of the flagging out. And you'd never believe how fast some of those big boys can go in waders. But they can run. Functional testing. You're testing the ability of the worker to do various job functions based on the job descriptions the employer gave you. If you look in the Coast Guard physical form, the 719K, it talks about physical abilities testing. So if the doctor thinks the mariner may or may not be able to do those jobs, if you don't think they can, you can actually do some of that testing. And then some of that requires a little equipment, space, training, whatever. But
for us, we looked at some of the different machines that did it. And, if you're pulling on a static wire saying I'm generating this much force and this is the coefficient of variation and all that stuff, people don't really understand much about what you're telling them. So we built this stuff into the clinic. So we built stairs, and we actually have another brace right up the middle, because when you're 450 pounds carrying 50 pounds, that's a lot of foot-pounds going up the stairs, and it creaks. We have that lifting station is set up where it actually supports 300 pounds on the shelf, which we don't do 300 pounds, but some companies will come in, and because it's so big, they'll have a transmission housing or a pump housing and say, look, this is like 102 pounds. Is this something if two guys practice lifting to see if they're going to be able to do this? So we let them come do that. And we have push-pull sled. And then the Coast Guard has a requirement that you have to be able to pass through a 24 by 24 hatch to get out. That's the new standard for escape hatches. Well, some folks were cutting out pieces of cardboard and saying, trying to get through this, and it looked like Hulk Hogan ripping through it, and so that's not appropriate. The hula hoops, they said we have something that's close to 24 inches. Well, you don't really get the hula hoop in a fire. So they want a rigid 24 by 24 box. Now, we do have a lot of folks that can't get through there. I mean, most of us could just run and dive through it. As one old boy said, can you give me a minute? He's trying to drag that thing across the floor, trying to crawl through it. And I said, I'll give you half an hour and a case of KY jelly. You're not going to get through that. And then we made we have a vertical ladder so they can climb up and down that as many times as they need to. And the same thing with the stairs. If a company says they have to do 60 stairs in a certain amount of time, or they got to do 50 stairs carrying 50 pounds or whatever, so we're able to customize any of those for them. And then for work comp, injury treatment, illness. I'm sorry.
I want to ask you why this is a pre-placement exam, so they are not under any kind of insurance. I mean, not under company insurance. If they get hurt getting through it or doing the test, who's liable?
In Louisiana, if they've offered employment, which triggers the pre-placement physical, if they get hurt doing this, the company's liable even though they hadn't worked a minute yet. So what we do is, if we don't think they can do that, or during the physical, they've had 3 back surgeries already, or they can't squat, they can't do a bunch of different things, we won't test them to that level. We actually defer them and get records on all these different things going on with them. We may send them to go get an orthopedic evaluation to get it, whatever's not right, fixed before we would ever come back and clear them. But we're pretty picky about what we do with who goes through there.
So when you do the stress testing, of course, we've got a lot of people with asymptomatic coronary disease. So if they happen to get chest pain, or they lie to get the job. So if they happen to get chest pain, it becomes workman's comp issue.
In Louisiana, it does. So some folks will run them straight through this no matter what. And if you do that enough times, and the guy probably shouldn't have been stress test, shouldn't have done functional testing because something was wrong with him, the companies get really unhappy when they have to buy a permanent total disability that you should have been screening for. So it's not all about the money when you're trying to do these. I treat them like I would treat it as my company, and I treat the folks like I would treat my family. So if my brother had a knee that was that bad that he couldn't squat, he couldn't balance on one foot, I wouldn't have him carrying 50 pounds up and down stairs, because if I blow my brother's knee out, he'll quit cooking for me. And in injury and illness evaluation, sometimes you'll see some occupational illnesses, mostly it's injuries. And then on consults for that, we see some that have been treated other places or somewhere, an ER, walk-in clinic, whatever else, and they want us to evaluate them, treat them, and determine fitness status or duty status. And on the fitness for duty, knowing the job description is key, and then whatever job modifications they can do and still do some portion of the job. A lot of companies are willing to work with us on that. If you look at everybody that's not doing this, I had a neurologist that cleared a guy after a stroke. It had been a year, and they were talking about cutting him off of the disability. And this guy came in, and his left arm's hanging. He's got a dynamic splint on his leg. He's got to drag his hip to get in. So his left hand is a paperweight that he uses to hold the paper to sign his pages, his notes. His left leg, he can't pick up 8 inches to get on the bottom step of the exam table. And the neurologist said, hey, it's a year. He should be well by now. He's released to regular duty. And he's an engineer on a vessel that goes 300 and 400 miles offshore. And I told him, I said, I can't clear you, 1. 2, you need to make sure to let the Coast Guard know what's going on and file for continuity on your license in case you ever get better. But you need to stay out on disability for now. And right now, at least you're disabled from your own occupation. So talked to the company, helped him do that. And the guy started crying because he said, my family doctor and my neurologist said, they're cutting you off a disability, so you need to just go back to work. But he started crying because he said, finally somebody's looking at what I can and can't do, So it's up to us to kind of look at that and be the bridge between regular health care and the employee. And again, people ask about record keeping, and there's way too much emphasis on recordables now. That used to be considered record keeping, so you could pay attention to things that were issues and make them better. Now it's become almost punitive. But my thing is, if you don't take care of the patient and take care of them right, usually whatever happened made it recordable, not me. So we just take care of folks. Now, you can have something that's recordable, you can have something that's compensable, so it might need to be paid for under work comp, but it might not be an OSHA recordable or vice versa. On some of the things for us with vessels, if the captain on a boat has an injury, he's getting a DOT drug screen under the Coast Guard, which is actually now into Homeland Security. That's where his license resides, and that's where his medical certification resides. And then OSHA record keeping may come into play on the injury itself. So a lot of it gets a little bit complicated. And then we do a lot of travel work, so those folks vacation, in foreign countries or doing mission work, those folks working there. A lot of the travel agents send everybody through us, which is nice. And we keep a ton of stuff on hand. And then for us, a physician sees every single person. Some places it's somebody at the window or a clerk or whatever, and they get things they didn't need and don't get things they should have. So we get a lot of follow-up on places that didn't do it quite right. If you're doing yellow fever, you have to have a stamp, and you can only do those vaccines in your clinic. You're not allowed to take yellow fever out of your clinic to do them. That's a good way to lose your stamp. And then malaria prophylaxis, a bunch of different medicines for that. And then routine immunizations. So we'll do a lot of flu stuff, although right now between the pharmacies and everybody else and the insurance companies, a lot of that, they've kind of taken some of that out. Meningitis vaccines for college students, TB testing for foreign travel, healthcare workers, bloodborne pathogens for healthcare workers, wellness programs. And that's whether it's based something in your clinic you're doing for a company, something's for a single company, or you're having some of them compete and do some things. We've also done area-wide deals where you had the hospitals and different physician offices do it, and those are good. And then we do reviews with companies to see their insurance costs for group health claims and the work comp claims, and look at interventions for some of the most frequent and the most expensive different DRG codes. Mobile services, you can do on-site services, audiometry, pulmonary function, respirator fit testing, drug screening, whether it's urine or hair, breath alcohol testing, physical exams, immunizations. You can get a trailer to do it, motorized, like a motor home to do it too. You can actually just bring it over there and set up in rooms to do things. But on-site exams, if you're by yourself, is kind of tough because you have to close your office for that day. And in consulting, writing and reviewing policies, workers' comp determinations, leave of absence policies, approvals, that sort of things. disability determinations, medical programs, surveillance. We help with job descriptions because a lot of folks don't know how to write a job description. I mean, some of them come in with a 19-page one. I like one, 2 pages front and back. Make it simple, make it easy, not too complicated. And then site visits. It's important to go out and look at what folks are doing so you understand the job, you understand what the requirements are. When I was in the defense contractor, we had a guy that told his orthopedic surgeon he moved 140 pounds by himself 8 times an hour. And we had I had a secret clearance, but I could take physicians on generic tours of the plant where we would sanitize, and wasn't no secret projects going on. And we happened to walk up right close to where this guy was. And I stopped for a second talking about something, and the orthopedic watches this guy, recognizes him, and sure enough, we let him go through 2 cycles, and he's moving 140 pounds by himself. He'd press a button, it'd go up, joystick, it'd move it over. So he said, "You mind if I go talk to him?" Not a problem. He went up to him, tapped him on the shoulder. The guy got pasty white. It was great. So site visits help too. And then I don't know if you watch Swamp People, but that's Troy Landry. He was the king of Mardi Gras 2 years ahead of me, and we actually wore the same crown. But he asked me, because he was in our office for a toast, and he asked me, since I'm king, what can I get for free? And so I got that electrician's glove and that tube of KY jelly, and all he could say was, "Shoot him, shoot him." All right, any questions?
If you want to come up, we'll take questions from the panel. Anything that you like, just shoot from the hip here, folks. Not so many questions? Okay, well, feel free to stop. I know, it's lunchtime. Feel free to stop any of us anytime in the hall, or any ACOM member. Feel free to come up if you have a question you didn't want to share with the group. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
Good job, man.